All right, what is up, my friends? Welcome. We're back with DJ Wheat. You missed the first sort of section of this, let's say, episode, whatever it is, on Wednesday. Me and DJ Wheat hung out about an hour and a half. We talked Magic, StarCraft, esports, and DJ Wheat, of course, a longtime fixture of Twitch, of esports in general for a long time now, very, very long time. Has been getting back into Magic after playing Magic way back in the day. I've been playing Arena now for a few weeks, and we were discussing Magic in general. That was a little more of a free form discussion. Today's gonna be a little more focused. We're working on drafting. So, Marcus, tell me a little about your experience. Have you done any drafts? You know where you're at a little bit, reintroductions.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks again, Jim. Great to be doing yet another stream with you. So I had a lot of fun on Wednesday, and thanks to everyone that tuned in, etc. So drafting, yeah, drafting is really interesting, Jim, because of course when I first started in Arena, I went out and did my internet due diligence in terms of like, hey, how should I spend my gold? How should I spend my gems? And the general consensus that I was hearing is like, hey, listen, drafting is the way to go to fill out your collection. So I'm like, okay, cool. I don't know anything about drafting, right? I know about drafting, but I don't have much experience. So my experience with drafting is a few times in the Twitch office, we would run drafts. My very limited Magic knowledge during that time, never, maybe I'd win like one game every once in a while, but like generally I was like, this is fun because I'm playing physical Magic with people. I love the idea and concept of drafting. However, that was like pretty much it. That was my experience. Maybe one or two drafts under my belt. So I have done one or two quick drafts under Arena. I believe one was a Strixhaven and another one was one of the previous sets. I don't recall which one at the time. But what I would say is that it was helpful for me to see like more cards and
Almost a
kind
year
of
I am Hey
educate
smiley face.
myself and try to get, up to speed on it. But I could clearly tell that I was lacking what I felt like were some critical skills in terms of what I should be picking, how I should be thinking about the mana curve. How do I think about, where I'm picking large mana cards versus, small mana cards. So whether this was my lack of experience, Jim, or it was as you said it the other day, like almost a choice paralysis in a way.
Mhm.
I felt like I was kind of psyching myself out because I'm here on card pick number one, and I'm like, well, these two cards look really good, but what if I don't get a bunch of cards that like that synergize with that one? And I think that this is the way to go, but then, and so that's kind of where I find myself is like not really understanding what like mental flow chart I should be evaluating when I'm looking at, these cards in front of me and thinking about the draft. So that is, as blunt as I can be. I'm kind of a, duckling just out of the egg. I'm like, this world is amazing, but what the hell do I do? Yeah.
Yeah, the option paralysis is a real thing. Drafting. That's why we're going to do a bot draft today, not a player draft. Because in a player draft, you have about a minute to make your first pick. And it sounds like a long time, but realistically, if you're not super familiar with the cards, or a lot of cards to read, it's a lot to take in at once. And you're right, it is option paralysis. It's this card's kind of cool, but you kind of go off in your head about how could this card go. Look at the next card, and the minute's up. So for sure,
right.
So I think today what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a brief overview of like two important concepts. I think for Limited as a whole. I think, as I said in our talk on Wednesday, Limited is kind of the format in Magic that most flexes your like general Magic skill. In some of the older formats, there are decks that are very, very linear. Like I discussed, like a Tron deck, maybe a Burn deck, where the deck has a very, very localized focused plan, and you can get good at that plan without necessarily being good at Magic. I mean, as we said, similar in StarCraft to being really good at cannon rushing, but not necessarily having any macro skills or anything like that. So I think that Limited is like the best bread and butter place. But that being said, it also makes it the most difficult because Magic is a very difficult game, and being generally good at Magic is more challenging than just being good at one particular thing. So I think that it's a great place to start. It is very challenging. I know for anyone who's new to drafting or inexperienced drafting, it can be discouraging at first because it's hard. It's really hard. There really is a lot to take in. And there's two elements of a draft, of course, being the draft itself, which is your deck construction, and the actual gameplay is complicated too because there's a lot of stuff happening. Normally in Constructed, you only maybe 10% of the cards are like actually playable. So when you play against a red-green deck, you can get an idea they're going to have, Bone Crusher Giant, or they're going to have Ember Cleave. They're going to have these kind of like popular cards, and you get used to them and you play around them. But in Limited, a bunch of the cards are playable. So they might be attacking their 2/2 into your 3/3, and they could have a pump spell, they could have a boom removal spell, a -X/-X. They could have, maybe they're attacking for some other reason because they want to trigger like a death trigger or something like that. So it's a lot to take in for sure. So
can I ask a question about that, Jim?
Absolutely.
Can you maybe briefly touch on the kind of fundamental difference between when we're drafting online versus like if I'm drafting with 6 friends? Because, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the drafting in person is going to be a different experience because at some point you're kind of seeing the cards that are in the pool, right? So you would know like, well, I didn't choose this card, but I'm pretty sure that Bobby over there did. So when I play him, I can expect he's going to have like this type of removal or whatever. That's not really an element in the online version, right?
Yeah, so what you're describing is the difference between pod drafting and league drafting. So you're right. At a local store, you have 8 players. You all draft, and then you play in your pod. So you play against the players you drafted with. And in a pod draft, that's how drafts happen at major events, at Pro Tours, at Grand Prix. So the pod drafting experience is a little bit different because you're right. You're sitting next to me. I open up an insanely good red rare that I'm, blue-green, and there's no good blue-green cards in the pack. I'm going to take the red rare and cut it from you so I don't have to play against it. And you don't always do that. I think people actually overvalue. It's called hate drafting a little bit, but that's definitely a relevant thing. And that rare's in the pack, or, you're right. And then on Arena, the drafts are typically league play, meaning that you're put into a pod with 8 players, you draft with them, and then you never see them again. So in Arena, optimal strategy is you want the person's next to you deck to be awesome because your goal is to cooperate. So you want to send them clear signals that, hey, red is open. I'm not going to be red. Here's a good red card. You go do your red thing. I'm going to do my blue and green thing. We're going to work together on this and have a great time. And then in paper, it happens a little bit less, although the strategy is still there. You still want to cooperate with your neighbors, just not like to an extreme amount. Whereas on a league draft, you want to pass them that rare. Put them more in red. That's great. I'm never going to see you again. And it's funny because the total other end of this is what's called team drafting, which is a little more advanced. But this was the Pro Tour after hours activity back in the day. It's called money drafts, where you'd have a 3-on-3 team draft. You'd be seated in opposite seats, and the goal was to make their decks as bad as possible. You'd cut everything. You'd run the hook, where you pass a good black card, and then take all the black cards to try and screw them. So that's like the other end of the spectrum too, which is kind of fun, but it's its own thing. So
one other question about that. So in Arena, after I draft, am I playing other people who are kind of participating in that draft, or could I go up against anyone deck?
Yeah, it's very unlikely you'll play against someone in your pod, because there's just so many players playing.
But only people that are also playing with drafted cards, right? So like,
I built the Omnath deck in paper.
Okay.
It's so many triers.
Yeah, so you'll play against other people who drafted the same set, usually in a similar ranking, but they are, they are in their own draft, and that can affect things a little bit sometimes. Some draft pools are just weak on average, where the cards opened aren't very good, and vice versa. So there's a little variation there, but for the most part, it's just the most convenient way to play. Ideally, in an ideal world, you'd only play in your own pod, but the problem is back in the day on Magic Online, that was the only way to play. You win your first round in 10 minutes, and you're waiting for 40 minutes for the next round. So it's just much more convenient to play in the league play. It has its downsides, but the upsides are far higher.
Got it. Okay, cool. Sorry.
So
Thank you for letting me.
I got 2 little spiels to go over. Any more questions before we start those?
Nope. That's great.
Cool. So the first one is, I think we touched on a bit on Wednesday when we were going over your decks and talking about the idea of rate. So again, to reiterate, rate is the value a card has just on its raw numbers. So for example, its power and toughness equal to its mana cost, right? So a 2/2 for 2 is a very playable, decent rate. The card doesn't need a ton more than that to be good. If you have a 4/4 for 3, that's a very good rate. That's a point where the rate is almost more important than any text on the card because that's just a very, very well-sized creature. If it has abilities in addition to that, that's a huge bonus, And then conversely, we saw like the Angel of whatever it was that was like a 2/6 for 5 with some kind of weird abilities. And then it's just not a really good body for the cost. Yeah. And then the abilities weren't good enough to make up for that. So if you have a creature with a cool ability, but it's like a 1/1 that costs 4, that ability better be really, really good. You better get paid off big time because you are not really getting a creature for that cost. And then vice versa, there can be a creature that's vanilla, which means it's blank. It's just a creature with no abilities. And if it's a 5/5 or 4, it's just good on numbers. So rate's an important thing in Limited because all of your cards, there's kind of like a baseline rate where if you're not really over that threshold, the card's just not really good enough. Either the abilities sound cool, either the synergies sound cool. You have to have cards in your deck that are of a certain power level at least. And that's kind of your baseline of where you want your card to be at this baseline rate of like a 2/2 for 2, or a 3/2 for 3, a 3/3, 3/4-ish for 4 kind of area. If it has flying, it can be a little smaller. If it has a good ability, it can be a little smaller, but you can't go too far below that bar. Okay. That's a very important one because people will look at a card and be like, this card's really cool. Yeah, but it's a 2/2 for 5. And like, it has an okay ability, but just not really there. So rate's an important one. And the second one is a very, very common acronym. You may have heard this called BREAD. You ever heard of BREAD before?
I've heard of bread, but if you were like, well, great, define it, I wouldn't. I think one of them's removal.
Sure. Right. Yeah, exactly. So BREAD is a very, very simple acronym that's taught to most new drafters to kind of give you a little bit of a heuristic as to what am I looking at going into a draft. So BREAD is, if I was good at graphics and stuff, it would be on the screen right now. But BREAD is B is for bombs. So your highest class of card you want in a draft is a bomb. And these are for cards you usually play constructed. The really good rares, the really good mythics, your planeswalkers, your huge dragons, Goldspan Dragon, or basically any planeswalker for the most part fits under this category. These really, really powerful cards. These are your big splashy effects where you cast the card and it has a chance to win the game on its own. And that is your highest priority when drafting. You see these pretty infrequently. But that's your number one priority. If you see a bomb, there really isn't anything to take over it. And it's kind of obvious. You open up the Goldspan Dragon, you're like, okay, I'm going to take the Mythic Flying Dragon, So that's step number one. Number two is removal, which is your way to deal with your opponent's bombs. Your opponent is a Goldspan Dragon, but I have a Doomblade, which can deal with the dragon. And the Doomblade can also kill a 2-drop or a big common creature or whatever it is. Now, it's funny, my chat's saying it was a little out of date, and they're kind of right. Magic has changed a bit in the last 5 or so years to the point where the threats and synergy are a little more important than just raw removal. There are times where you'll want to take a good common creature over a removal spell, which we'll kind of get to, but it's just a basic heuristic is that killing things is good. Now, again, there's a question of rate on this too, where unlike with creatures, it's about size. With spells, it's about efficiency. So a 2-mana card like Power Word Kill in the new set, is a very efficient way to kill a creature. It has a little bit of a downside. It can't kill dragons, which kind of sucks, but it's very, very cheap. It's an instant. You're getting a good rate. So if you cast this card and you kill your opponent's 5-mana creature, you've traded up on mana. It's instant speed. Maybe they're playing a trick in combat and you can respond by it and get a good 2-for-1. So then there are, the sorcery speed, 4-mana common kill spells that are usually pretty good, but not incredible, where they kill things, but they're not very efficient. And there's often the really expensive ones. I believe Eye of the Beholder is the one in the new set. It's a 6-mana. A creature gets minus 11 or something like that. And those are, not a card you would always play, but if you need a way to kill things, that can be good. But the rate is a little rough. It is 6 mana kill a creature, but 6 mana is a lot. So you have a way to deal with that big dragon, but you really don't want to kill it a 2-mana creature with this thing. So
right.
So the scale of removal is definitely, it used to be back in the day, but the removal spells were all really, really good, and the creatures weren't as good. So you always prioritize removal over everything else. But it's a little bit different now, but still a very important basic heuristic. Next one is Evasion. which is a way to kind of break through stalls. So you have your flying creatures, maybe unblockable creatures. And again, this is also like, I think that like synergy and card advantage is a little more important now than it was, where flyers used to be like the best thing in limited. You would just take your flyers, a 2/2 flyer for 3, a 2/3 flyer for 4, and those cards are a little underpowered now relative, but it's still the general idea of like, I need a way to win the game. Just playing a 3/3 on the ground every turn is not going to do it. Whether it's flying, evasion, maybe it has a pump ability to get over blockers, or just some way to like push through and win the game if the board gets stalled out, which does happen. Brad, B-E-R-E. A. What did last do? Aggro. Yeah, so A is for aggro, which kind of just like creatures and stuff like that, average stuff. And then D is for duds, which is just like your junk. And those two are kind of like self-explanatory. So, but the basic heuristic is there. Again, it's a little out of date. It's not a perfect, roadmap, but the general idea of what that is, the things that are most valuable, your bomb top tier cards, and these can be like honestly occasionally rares, even uncommons, whereas occasionally it's an uncommon that's like a mythic uncommon where it's just so good. So your super high quality cards, your removal stuff, and then your evasive threats, your high quality cards. Any card that produces card advantage is also very important. So for example, in this current set, Owlbear is just really, really good. It's a 4/4 trample creature for 5 in green. And when it comes into play, you draw a card. So on rate, a 4/4 trample for 5 is a little below the bar. It's a little bit below the bar. But when you're drawing a card, it just shoots way up at that point because now it's replacing itself. And if you were to play one of these every turn, you would never run out of cards. There's also the 2/1 Priest of Forgotten Realms or something like that. It's a 2/1 that gains 1 life in white. Same idea. I had 5 of those in the draft I did on Wednesday after you left in day 9 rated. And the cards are just great. You just keep playing them and playing them and playing them. So, cards that have good abilities like that, replace themselves are important. There are, some cards that will say like draw 2 cards, things like that. Just a way to kind of push through and just provide some sort of forward progress where you're not just like playing a creature every turn and just hoping that it's enough to get through. Any questions on that?
No questions on that. I did have one question come in from chat while we were chatting though. Does Arena Draft use the deck smoothing that you were talking about?
In best of one, yes. So any game of best of one on Arena has the hand smoothing algorithm where behind the scenes it just draws you 2 opening hands and keeps the one with the better land ratio. Just to kind of ruin the feel bads of like, well, you're only playing one game. Oops, I got mana screwed, and then the game's over. So, and best of 3 does not have that at all. About the deck smoothing. So, and that is the thing. I think in best of 1, you might play like 1 less land. You can work it a little bit in best of 1. Typically, I play 16 lands in best of 1, depending on the format too. But I will say one important thing about draft in the last few years also is that synergy is important, and kind of like we said with your deck building and constructed. It's very important your deck has a goal. You need to go into your deck kind of knowing how are games going to end with this deck? What's my end game look like? Am I a red-green aggro deck where I'm going to play a 1-drop, a 2-drop, a 3-drop, attack, pump spell, you're dead? Am I a kind of deck where I'm going to have some really high-powered cards in the late game and I'm going to play some kill spells and some blockers and just kind of stall and win that later part of the game? Am I going to have evasion? Am I going to have this and that? This is sort of called an archetype, and draft formats have been pretty archetype focused in the last few years, which honestly makes them really good formats because only some decks want some cards. So you might be a blue-black deck might value a certain blue card much higher than like a blue-white deck or a blue-green deck.
Sure.
Good example would be the Spy in the new set. It's like the 3/2 common blue creature that whenever it hits your opponent, you draw a card. That card is really good if you're like blue-black or blue-red, and you're able to kind of plow the road for it. You play the Spy, they play a creature, kill it, attack, draw a card. They play a creature, kill it, attack, draw a card. But in a blue-white deck or a blue-green deck where there isn't much removal, the card loses a lot of value. It's just a creature. It's just going to kind of run into their creatures and not really do much. So the idea of kind of, knowing what your deck's plan is, kind of having an overarching, the theme, and each color kind of has a theme. Usually there's a signpost uncommon in every set that's going to be a gold card. That's going to be a blue-white card or a blue-black card. and each color usually has one, and that card will usually let you know this is what this color combination is about in this format.
Right.
So in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, the green-white Signpost Uncommon is the 2-mana creature that whenever you gain a life, it gets a counter, and you scry 1. Letting you know that, hey, green-white theme is about kind of gaining life triggers. There's a common unicorn. There's green cards that gain life. That's the theme of green-white, The blue-red theme is like based on rolling dice. So the blue-red card is all about if you roll a die, you get a bonus if this happens kind of thing. So,
right.
Finding that sort of Signpost Uncommon is a good way to kind of get to a general idea of, okay, what's this color pair about? And you end up having 10 total sort of archetypes. Not that you must draft one of those archetypes in particular, because usually some are good and some aren't that good. But it gives you an idea of like what each deck is shooting for. And then there are other decks. In Kaldheim, the snow format, the 5-color snow deck was great. And you would just take like a snow land every pack, mana fixing, whether you could splash whatever rare you opened. You'd be playing like the common 6/6 that gained 4 life to stay alive and kill spells. Like that deck was really, really good. But it wasn't like an obvious deck to draft. There was no real signpost for that. It was just sort of like, hey, we figured this out. This deck's pretty good.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, as far as the like deck having a goal and how we'll game Zent, and this at least is one area where my brain is in tune to this. I mentioned one of my favorite games to play is also Clash Royale, and even though it's very limited, you're using 8 cards in your deck. It's very much the same philosophy, right? Like, you can't just throw a bunch of 7 elixir cards in there and expect you're just gonna, win off of Massive HP. So, I definitely get that. I think like where my brain sort of then has a disconnect is like, if you don't know what your next 30 cards are gonna be, then how can you be putting together a goal, right? Like, I would imagine there are going to be drafts where your goalpost is going to be shifting a little bit,
exactly,
based off of like, well, I wanted to go this way, but these cards became available, so I'm kind of shifting over and moving the goalpost to over here instead.
Exactly, and that's called being flexible in the drafts. Your first few picks, you're being speculative. You take your first pick, it's a really good green card. You get past a good black card, you take that, and then third pick, there's this really good blue uncommon in the back. You kind of look at the pack and say, well, there's 2 commons missing, and this really good blue uncommon is here. It looks like this lane might be open. So I'll take the blue card, and I recognize that by taking this blue card, I'm probably not going to play either the black card or the green card, because I'm going to be 2 colors probably. But that's okay,
right? Because
your goal is to kind of like get into the right lane. So your first, like, say maybe 8 picks are you poking around, taking opportunities as they come, and keeping an eye out for the open lane, and kind of trying to figure out what your path is. And a lot of this is why drafting is so fun, because you're looking at sort of like main scenarios and backdoor scenarios, where I'll take this green card, it would be good in this green-black deck, but if his blue cards are pans out, it could always shoehorn into that as well. So that's why taking picks that are kind of open-ended in the first few picks are usually pretty good. That's honestly a reason often why you see people not wanting to take a 2-color card as a first pick. So you open up a pretty good uncommon that's red and green.
Right.
Now you're on the risk of like, well, if red and green aren't open, I'm really locked myself in with this, And there's times where you'll just jump ship. You'll take a red-green card, take a green card, and then pack 3 is a really good white card. You take it. And then pack 4, another good white card, you take it. And then pack 5 is a really good blue card, and there's no red or green cards. And you just jump. And you just, so the first 8 picks are very, very important as far as like speculating, kind of like taking your shots, keeping yourself open. And your goal realistically is to just try and get into that open lane. There are 8 players at this table. They're all trying to build decks out of a limited card pool. And if there are 4 players trying to build green-black, you don't want to be anywhere near green-black. Your goal, if you can be the only player or one of 2 players in a color, then you get it all. Like it's all coming around for you, and then you'll typically find that when you're in the right lane, you'll finish the draft with like, 28 good cards, and you'll get kind of like late, especially those signpost uncommons, because if nobody's green-white, that card's just going around, and if you can kind of get yourself into that green-white deck, and then you get those really good payoff cards late that no one else wants realistically because the card doesn't do anything in any other deck, that's a great spot to be. And that's definitely the kind of bread and butter, the goal of drafting well is to kind of like find the open lane, lock yourself in that spot, and then you get all the good stuff late in pack 2 and pack 3.
Got it. I did just have one, it's kind of an aside question.
Mm-hmm.
Talking a lot about being flexible, moving that goalpost. Is it should I strap in and expect that there may be times that I am trying to be flexible, I'm trying to set my goal, and my draft just really sucks? Right?
I mean, it's gonna happen. For sure. Like the thing is that's kind of the hardest part of drafting is the basic stuff is all there. You could just sit down and be like, I'm drafting green white because I like this deck, and you can just take the right pick for your green white deck every draft and do okay, as long as you'll be evaluating cards right. You understand that Owlbear is better than this random whatever 4-mana flyer, but you'll never be great at drafting. The real skill in drafting is that real ability to be flexible and kind of toe the line well enough between I'm going to jump in at the right time, but I know what the right time is, and I also know when the right time to get out is. And that's what makes drafting so fun. It's just trying to keep yourself open, taking your picks in a manner where you can be flexible, and then that whole song and dance, that first pack of really trying to find your thing. And then there's times where you'll hit pack 2 and things go awry. Maybe you did a really good job in pack 1 of being taking blue and white cards, and you've passed almost no blue and white cards. So the person who's passing back to you in pack 2 should not be blue and white, and they open a big blue rare, like a big blue dragon, and they just jump in. So it's dynamic. It's constantly changing. And now you realize in pack 2, man, blue is really drying up. Maybe I should be white-green, or what's my other lane? What's my other path? So it keeps changing the whole draft. And there's a lot of drafts where, you hit pack 3 and you'd be like, man, I should have jumped ship. I should have been blue-red, or whatever it was. And you watch really good drafters, and it happens to them too. And they'll be like, oh man, I should have jumped ship. Or they'll say, oh, I nailed it. I jumped out at just the right time. I got hooked up perfectly. And it's challenging. It's very, very difficult to kind of toe that line perfectly, which makes it so fun.
Yeah. So, quick question from chat. How late in the draft is too late to change your plan? When does your flexibility need to be shifting into more all right, I'm planting my feet now because my options are going to be more limited as we keep going?
By the end of pack 1, and then maybe the first pick or 2 of pack 2, you should have a pretty good idea of where you're at. But at the same time, you can jump. If a color is super open, you only need 23 cards for your deck. You end up drafting a full pool of 45 cards. You only need 23. So if you pick up 10 or 11 playables in a color in pack 3 because it's super open, that's half your deck right there. So you can switch later if things happen really weird, but ideally by the mid to end of pack 1 you'll have a pretty good idea, and then pack 2 solidifies it because pack 2 is going the other way. So if you hit pick 3 or 4 in pack 2 and things are flowing well, you'll know that okay, blue white was open this way, I kind of cut it off, now coming back this way it's still pretty open. But if it's totally closed off, you'll know it in the first few picks, and maybe you can find a backup plan of all right, I'm going to exchange red for green, and green seemed kind of open, but I wasn't really drafting it, and, or green seemed really closed, and I passed almost no green cards, so I'll try and get green going back this way, and then I'll get my white cards going back this way, because it is the left, right, left kind of thing. So you have a different person passing to you at different times, so it does change the dynamic there too. So the answer to the question is ideally by the end of pack 1, typically, by the first few picks of pack 2, you should have a really good idea, but it's not insane to switch, at some point in pack 2 and just jump if things are really, really open.
Got it. Okay, great.
Cool. So any more questions?
I'm sure there's going to be more that'll come up, but no, those are actually got a couple questions from chat, so thank you, Glam and others for those.
Sweet.
I don't think so. No, I think we'll probably have more as we
we'll have tons more. Yeah, the on the job training here is the most important thing, because there's so much to discuss, which is why we're going to do a bot draft. It doesn't necessarily the ideal way to draft, and honestly, it's going to end up being Zendikar Rising, because that's the current format that's legal.
Right.
That part doesn't matter much either. What matters most is the sort of just the heuristics we're going to go over, looking at each pick, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about each pick because it's a bot draft you have forever. So we can go over each pack and talk about what cards are coming and not coming. Bot drafts are also a little more sterile than player drafts are because the bots become predictable. For a while, when Arena first came out, there were no player drafts. It was only bot drafting, and players would solve the bot after like a few weeks or a month, where they would just figure out what cards the bot undervalued. You would just draft that deck every time. And because each player is drafting in the bot pod, theoretically, if everyone just forces the blue-black mill deck, then everyone is the blue-black mill deck. There's no card availability issue, where it's not like in an 8-player draft, everyone can't draft the same deck. But if you're all drafting against a computer, then everyone can have the same deck. So bot drafts were like, they're fine, but they're not like super fun. The craziness
really more
of
an
people.
Introductory, a real good way to
Right,
I will probably grind out some quick drafts just so I'm like, I feel more confident in my draft picking. Now
Exactly.
I'm moving on to my
It's the time too, and just having the time to think about it and read all the cards and just kind of take your time to kind of work through it. It's like poker too, where like you sit at a poker table, you are sitting with 9 other human beings. They are irrational. Yeah. They are. Maybe they're having a bad day or a good day. Maybe they're just feeling it, So in a paper draft, in a real person draft, like they might just change colors in pack 2. They might just really want to draft blue black. They might just whatever irrational thing, incorrect or correct, makes the draft so dynamic. So bot drafts aren't necessarily ideal, but for our purposes today, it's gonna be perfect.
Okay, very good, very good. Do you want me to switch over then?
Yep. So yeah, let's fire up Arena. We'll fire up we'll get the change screen over to the full screen. And yeah, we're just going to walk through a draft. And again, folks, if you're just tuning in on my side, welcome. How's it going? I'm here with djWHEAT, Twitch and esports legend, and I'm getting back into Magic, and we're going over a draft today. So we're about to do a draft, and we're going to walk through the picks, and should be a good time. Let me make sure my thing is sized right. Display capture. Make this a little bit bigger. Perfect. Works for me. You're gonna get your cam up too, right? There we go. Perfect.
Yep. Sorry. Yep. There
Excellent.
We should be good to go.
I gotta move my chat here. All right. Great. So let's hop in for a Zendikar Rising quick draft. Again, I actually haven't drafted this format really at all, but it doesn't matter. The basics are the basics. We can go over. It's one of the things too is that when you draft a good amount.
I'm gonna change one thing real quick, Jim. Sorry about that. I'm just gonna add you also to this side. So
add me to the overlay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. So people are just like, who is this voice of God? That
I am the voice of drafting intuition. There I am.
I'll put you over here on the other pet. Hopefully that'll be good. We might have to move that one a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say probably below you would be good, actually. So on the right side where the cards are. That's perfect.
Okay, great. Okay.
Sweet. So yeah, so when you draft a lot, you do say you've done like 10 drafts at this point. You have a really good feel for the cards in the format. You kind of know all the cards, and you can kind of just glance the pack and be like, okay, like that one, don't like that one. And so the first few drafts you do are a lot to take in also, because you just need to kind of like read the cards, get a feel for them. And it's funny, like I used to draft a ton back in the day when I was like getting serious about Magic back in like the early 2000s. I would draft like 3 times a day. Like there were formats where I had hundreds of drafts under my belt, and I would just look at the pack and just know all the cards instantly, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I could just fly through it, And I didn't actually like when a new set came out, because I didn't like not knowing the cards. So those first like 5 drafts where I was like, all right, I got to read the cards and learn the cards. I didn't have that sort of like innate just like knowledge. So the first few drafts can be a little interesting. Again, the fact that this set is unfamiliar though is kind of irrelevant, because all the basic heuristics we're going to go over, and that's going to be cool. So let's fire up and jump right in.
All right. 5,000 gold. I should probably turn off my arena tutor, right?
Yeah, I would turn it off, and then out on the top right, the little like window with the window, you hit that one. Perfect. So you can see the cards a little better.
Got it.
Sweet. So while you look at the pack, take a second, you can read through the cards, and then tell me what your thoughts are initially.
Okay. So let me look here. Some of these I recognize. Uh, well, so my first question is already going to come up. So I see that there is, right, the Crawling Barrens, which is a land,
Mm-hmm.
right? Put 2/1/1 counters on Crawling Barrens. You may then have it become an elemental creature. I guess one of my questions would be, are specialized lands any sort of priority pick in drafting? Um, or is that like no, because then you're kind of like cornering yourself into a color right away?
Yeah, so one of the big things about drafting is trying to find ways to mitigate mana flood. There are some formats where you just, you kind of just, I drew 10 lands. I couldn't do anything. I just had 10 lands. So the ways you can have that can do that can be card draw or like looting effects or creature lands is a really good one. I think Crawling Barrens is like phenomenal. It is colorless, so we're keeping that flexibility range open where no matter what happens, we're playing Crawling Barrens in our deck. I couldn't really imagine a scenario where you would need to not play Crawling Barrens. So Crawling Barrens is a very, very powerful card. It's a little slow, but once you hit that's kind of middle stage of the game where each player has kind of played their cards out, now they're kind of like, I'm drawing a card a turn. I have like 8 lands in play. Not much is happening. You can just like pump, 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 attack for 10 kind of thing. So Crawling Barrens is a very, very powerful card. It's pretty good on rate. It's not amazing on rate. It's not a card that like blows you away, but the opportunity cost, which is a big thing that we'll go over a lot in drafting, is very, very low. It's a land, doesn't even count towards your spells. It's a very, very good first pick because of that. Because it's a good card in general and it's colorless. The rest of the pack here, there's some fine cards. The Night Runner is pretty sweet. It's the 2/3 that allows you to exile a card from your library and kind of like pseudo draw a card. It's similar to the 3/2 that draws a card in blue, but better because red's better at killing things. But cards like fine. Everything else here is like kind of just fine. Just like some random 2 drops like Dauntless Survivor and Cliffhaven Sellsword that are like okay. It's honestly a kind of a weak pack. Relic Axe and Alpha Control. So Relic Axe is like kind of locked in on Warriors. It's a little more of a narrow card. So Crawling Barrens here feels like a really, really solid first pick. It's just the kind of card where it's very flexible, it's powerful, it's low opportunity cost, and it's colorless, so you'll always play it.
Got it. All right. Confirm that pick.
All right. So
great. Ruin Crab. Let's see. Gain life. That's a 3/0. Other warriors you control. That card seems pretty good. Target creature you control gains indestructible to the end of the turn. Also, these definitely look a little bit better than the last pack. I feel like Landfall just is like seems crazy good all the time. I just like Landfall cards seem to just be, real popular right now in a lot of
it's super solid because it's obviously a pretty easy trigger to maintain, and it does sort of like semi-solve that land flood problem where like you've drawn your 7th land, but it still does something, which is fine too. There's times where you want to draw 7th land to trigger your 2 landfall effects.
Yeah. I think we saw a Riptide in the last deck. That's a big card, but target creature gets negative XX until end of turn, or X is the number of creatures in your party. I'm not too keen on that one. Defender and Reach. Creatures you control have haste. That seems pretty good. Top 5 cards you let reveal a creature card, put it in your hand. This 3/2. So I guess in kind of like thinking about bread at this point, I kind of feel like I would maybe lean more towards either the Ox or the Canopy or Kargan in terms of like what I think are probably the better cards in this particular.
Yeah, so pretty good job identifying a rate. The bailout's a pretty good rate. It's a 4/3 as an ability. The 4/4 for 5 as an ability is pretty solid. The War Leader is definitely a good card, but it has the issue of what we discussed kind of earlier, where it's a gold card. It's a red card and a white card, and it also requires a very specific thing. There are a lot of random warriors. A lot of the red and white creatures just happen to be warriors, but it's a very locking pick. Where Crawling Barrens is a super open pick, right? We're always playing Crawling Barrens, but taking the War Leader here, we may or may not be red white. And it's a pretty specific thing. And if we end up not being one of the colors, we're just not playing it. So I think War Leader is it's fine, but it's definitely kind of a risky pick. So there's a rare missing. So the first thing you usually look at is what's missing. Is there a rare missing? Doesn't really tell us much. That rare could have been any color, If there's a common missing, and it's a really good black uncommon, you can safely assume that a black card was not taken, kind of thing, So this pack, Scion of a Swarm is it's okay. It's one of those cards where it's middle of the road on rate. A 3/3 flyer for 5 is just fine, and the ability could be kind of cool. The bailout seems pretty reasonable. Again, I'm not super familiar with this format, so I'm actually kind of not sure what the right pick is in a pure perspective. I think that the Canopy bailout is a very, very solid safe pick. It's just 4/3 for 4, super solid on rate. Green landfall stuff's usually pretty good. The rogues is a possibility. There are rogues in this set, so the Rune Crab helps to turn on the rogue effects, which care about having 8 or more cards in the graveyard, or 7 more cards, 8 or more cards. I think it's 7 or 8. I don't know, but so the crab, if you knew you wanted to go specifically down that path of black blue rogues, but in that essence, Rune Crab is almost a blue-black card, because it's only good in a certain archetype.
Yeah.
Same with the Scion too, where Scion's a black card, but life gain stuff is usually in white. So there are life gain effects in black and white. So Scion. So now we're kind of seeing this archetype thing, like I was talking about, where what they've done a really good job with in the last few years is making it so some decks want some cards and not other cards. And that makes the drafting process really flexible, because it's not just I'm blue, take the best blue card. I'm black, take the best black card. You specifically want some black cards and don't want some black cards. So I would say here that the bailout feels like a very safe pick. I think both Scion and Crab could lead to potentially better decks, but the bailout is just going to be good. In any green deck we play, it's just a super solid card. So I think I would probably bail off here.
Okay. And then also, you mentioned something about noticing the rare pick. So
yes.
Just so that I'm totally clear, these are 14 card or 15 card packs when they open, or
they're 14, I believe, because in paper there'd be a basic land as the 15th card.
Got it. So 14, and then is there always going to be a rare in it?
Yeah, so every pack has a rare and 3 uncommons. Okay. And this is a little different from paper, because in paper, if you open up a foil, that foil replaces a common. So you could have 2 rares in a pack, where you open up a foil mythic and a rare and the uncommons, or you could have 4 uncommons in a pack because of the foil, and that kind of throws things off, where you get past the pack with a rare, but there actually wasn't another rare taken over it, kind of thing. But on Arena, it's very simple. There's just 1 rare, 3 uncommons in every pack, and you see the pack and you know it was taken. And again, that's a big part of the first few signals, because that lets you know of the class of card that was taken. And there's no way to know when a rare is taken. You should have no idea. It could be anything, But if an uncommon's taken, it was a pretty good rare in the pack, because some rares are pretty good but not great, and there are definitely uncommons that are better than rares. So if there's a rare in the pack and an uncommon's missing, you can go, okay, well, that color's probably open, and vice versa. So your goal is to kind of figure out what colors were taken, and again, finding that open lane of what colors are available for me, so I can kind of try and get away from everyone else and just do my thing and get all the cards I want.
Okay. All right, great. I'm gonna take Canopy then, and third pick. So, okay. Let's see.
Chat's saying that they would have taken the Crab, and the Crab's win rate in best of 1 drafts is very, very high. But we're not going to game a system as far as what's good.
Let's be clear, chat. I've got morals, okay? All right, and we've only got 3 hours. If this was an 8-hour stream, maybe go on the mill. No. Well, immediately I see some removal, big flying card, another Flying Flash. Not sure I like that one. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life. 8 or more cards. Don't know if I really like that one. So here's my like thought here. So I'm just gonna throw it out there. Chat, don't laugh at me, but like immediately I'm kind of thinking, well, I have the Baloth, and I see there's a lot of black and a lot of white, which means that my future picks could be a little rough. But I also feel like the Blight Blade, which is 1 mana, 1/1 with Death Touch, is pretty good. Like it seems to me like that can be under aggro and under removal. So I would kind of put that immediately on the side in terms of like, I feel like that could be pretty good. Looking at like what is colorless here also. Stonework Pack Beast is a Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard, which I guess adds to the party. Sentinel kicked. That's a huge kick. Enters with 2 counters. As long as it has 1/1 counter, it can attack. As though it didn't. It has Defender on it. I see. So, yeah, I mean, my brain is telling me, and this is where I'm hoping to get clarification. I'm like, would I be committing too early? If I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go with the Blight Blade because I'm sitting on green. It's aggro. It's kind of removal in a way. That's where I would be.
So I think that the Blight Blade is actually much more of a defensive card than an offensive card.
Okay.
I think that the way landfall works, especially with the landfall effects that buff your creature when you play a land drop, is it ends up being a very, very aggressive format, and those end up being very aggressive cards because they're really big on your turn and smaller on your opponent's turn, which incentivizes you to attack a lot. So I think if we were going to be green, maybe red-green or green-white, we're probably going to be somewhat aggressive, and Blight Blade is more of a defensive card. And right off the bat, this is an example of kind of thinking about what's my deck going to look like and what's my end game going to look like. You know, so I would say Blight Blade and Baloth don't play particularly great together. Blight Blade would be good in a more defensive deck, maybe like a green-black deck, you know, or maybe just a green-red deck that's more defensive for whatever reason, where you have a good bomb in your deck, you have some good top-end cards, and you want to kind of play Blight Blade early, just trade off with something. There are some effects also that allow, it's like this creature deals damage to its power to another creature kind of thing, and that plays well with Death Touch, a little synergy there. But I think that for now, Blight Blade would be a little far below the bar of what I want. Are you familiar with sports at all?
With what?
With sports?
I mean, it depends on what you define familiar, right?
All right, well,
like,
the idea of a draft in sports where, like, you know, a team is drafting players for their new season, and, you know, they already have a goalie, and their options are to take a really, really, really good goalie or kind of middle, you know, of the road center. Don't draft down. You just take the good goalie and trade him later or whatever, you know. So I think taking Blight Blade here would be drafting down too far. That's a card we can get much later in the draft.
I like that. Don't draft down.
Right. So I think the options here, I think Shepherd of Heroes is definitely a really, really solid card on rate. And it's kind of a tricky card because you read it and it looks like it's a party synergy card. It says you gain 2 life for each creature in your party.
Sorry, which one?
The Shepherd of Heroes.
Oh, Shepherd.
The white card.
Oh, got it.
So you look at it and you're like, oh, this is like a party synergy card. But again, if you go back to the idea of rate, this card's pretty good. This is a 5 mana, 3/4 flyer, which is a pretty good body, and it gains at least 2 life when it comes into play because it counts itself, because a cleric is part of the party.
Sure.
So just erase all the text about party and just say 3/4 flyer for 5 that gains 2 life. That's pretty good. That's a pretty solid card on rate. So it is a little expensive. There's definitely an element of not wanting to, like, I think that valuing cheap cards over expensive cards is generally a good heuristic because you'll play 6 2-drops in your deck if they're good. You can't play 6 5-drops. You know, so your sort of value above replacement for more expensive cards is a little worse because you don't want to end up with 5 5-drops. So there's a little bit of that going on, but the card is very, very good. So I think the Shepherd of Heroes is super solid. Synchronized Spellcraft, which is right below it, is 5 mana instant, deals 4 to a creature. This is sort of like your typical, it's a removal spell, but it's not like a great removal spell. It can kill things. It's a little clunky. It's at least an instant. And being an instant is absolutely huge in Limited because instants are what allow you to sort of break things up. You know, you attack with a creature, they double block. If you're able to kill one creature and then the double block doesn't work and the other creature dies too, that's your bread and butter 2-for-1. And then the 2-for-1 is when you trade one of your cards for 2 of their cards. Very, very important part of limited, because there aren't really, in constructed, decks have these really powerful engines, or maybe they get a Planeswalker in play, or they play Sphinx's Rev and draw 5 cards, and the kind of nickel and dime card exchanges don't matter as much in constructed, but in limited they're really important. So whenever you can kind of get those exchanges where you get a 2-for-1, you break up a block, or your opponent goes to play a giant growth on their creature in combat, and you're like, nope, sorry, Spellcraft. Now you've killed their creature and killed their giant growth, and again, that's 2-for-1 as well. So being an instant is very important. I think if Synchronized Spellcraft was a sorcery, it would be like very borderline playable, but as an instant, it's certainly fine. So the Shepherd seems good, the Spellcraft seems good. You have made note that there are a lot of black cards in this pack, but none of them are like particularly incredible. I mean, the Consumption's kind of cool. Both Skitter Sneak and the Priest are Archetype kind of cards, where the Skitter Sneak is good in like the mill sort of deck, and the Priest is good in the life gain sort of deck, but they're not like universally good, so they're fine. And then we look at the cards that are missing. There's a rare missing and an uncommon missing, and both the uncommons that are left are both like just kind of like middling okay cards. So not really a major signal there. There's no real like, all right, a good uncommon and a good rare was taken. Still don't really have a good read on what's going on. So there are some packs that just like only have one green card. Like, is it possible that the rare or uncommon was green? Yeah, but we don't really have a good read on that otherwise. So I think here we're taking Shepherd of Heroes or we're taking Spellcraft. I think that red pairs a little better with our Canopy Bailoff, because a lot of the red-green theme is about landfall and being aggressive and stuff like that, whereas Shepherd's a little more of a defensive, like, late-game card. So this pick will be up to you. I think either pick is reasonable. I think that the Shepherd's probably a little better as a card, but I think that red-green is a little more desirable than green-white, but that makes it about even. So we'll leave it up to you. Okay. Spellcraft or Shepherd of Heroes.
I'm gonna go with the Angel.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with the Angel. Let's see what happens. All right, another Scion. Messelinks gets 2 plus or 0/2. Seer. Scry X is the number of creatures. Scry 2, then draw a card. Counter non-creature spell. Hunger, Champion. Control another warrior. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. There's another Baloth. And Zendikar. Alright, so immediate first question. I would imagine that in a scenario where it's like there is a card here that I already have, right? Mm-hmm. So again, understanding there's a lot of variables there, because if I have like a 5-mana card, I see another 5-mana card, just like you mentioned, probably not totally realistic in terms of if I draw 2, it puts me in a bad spot. So if I have a duplicate in a pack as I see it, do you want to pick into that duplicate, or is that only in certain scenarios, or do I want to be expanding, right? Well, general philosophy, I guess, in sort of this sort of pick scenario
is entirely dependent on the card. Like you're saying, you wouldn't want that third 6 drop. You kind of just, at that point, you've hit your quota, But a card like Canopy Bailoff is just a good card. You do want to watch your 4 drops, don't have too many of them. The cheaper the card is, the more you're likely to want multiples. But if the card's really good, the card's really good. So it totally depends on like the class of quality of the card. There are cards that you will always play no matter what. So for example, good kill spell. We haven't really seen a card like that yet. I can imagine scenarios where I would not play Baloth or I would not play Shepherd if I had too many 4 drops, if my deck was kind of off either theme, And there are also cards where you'll just always play them. You'll never not play, because they're that good. So it depends on the class of the card. I think Baloth is it's a pretty good cards. I'd probably play most of them if I had them, but there's a scenario where you could definitely cut them. Now, this pack, so far, and this happens a lot in bot drafts. So far, again, we have a rare and 2 uncommons taken. So again, not really any signal at all in the commons. However, there's a Scion of a Swarm. And now we're I think this is a good spot to be kind of speculative and look at what are our backdoor options. All right. So we took Shepherd of Heroes. Now, Shepherd of Heroes is a good card. It's just like a very solid card by itself. but it also gains life, and it also is like has a party thing going on too. So it can sort of play that role of a synergy piece in a life gain deck or things like that. And it also is just a good card in general, which is kind of like a real good place to be because it's very flexible. And now we have a Scion of a Swarm here. Not the best card ever printed, but a solid card. It's a flyer. It's evasive. The black-white theme is life gain. So, that could be a possible path. It's a 5-drop. And we recognize that if we're taking Scion of the Storm, we're sort of untaking Canopy Bailoff.
Right.
But that's okay. Because we want these first two picks to be speculative. We don't want to just lock into our deck immediately, So I think this is a spot where, can I see the whole pack again, please? Just get a quick look at it. So we have the Bailoff is fine. Mesa Lynx is like an okay 2-drop. Nothing else here is really that exciting. Like Scorch Rider is an okay creature. The Champion is okay. Everything here is very, very middling. They're all cards that are they're okay. They're very replaceable, not very exciting. So I'm pretty happy taking a speculative pick here and just taking the Scion of a Swarm and poking around a bit and seeing if this life gain deck might be open, seeing if black-white's open.
That makes sense. Yeah,
so keeping ourselves open, and the thing is that, in our first 5 or 6 picks, losing 2 or 3 of them is fine. This is more important to pick our lane as soon as possible and kind of find the right spot to be, and then you'll get plenty of cards later. We only need 23 cards. It's not like you get bonus points for going into your deck build. You're like, well, I have 29 playable cards, so 6 of them get to sit on the bench. You don't get any points for that. So we have time to be flexible. Way back in the day when I first started drafting, the density of playable cards was much lower. There were a lot of just chafe cards. It'd be like a 1/3 flyer for 4. Cards you would just never play. So there was issues back then of getting enough playable cards to actually fill out your deck. But these days, almost every card's reasonable. There are a lot of cards like Cascade Seer. I wouldn't really want that card in my deck. A 3/3 for 4 is just not a good rate. It's just a very, very middling rate.
Right.
The effect is pretty middling. It's like a synergy payoff for doing a certain thing, but the payoff's really low. It's just scrying. But if I have to put that card in my deck, all right. It's fine. It's serviceable.
Sure.
I don't want to, but if I have to, sure. So there's a lot of that going around. So there's plenty of playables. So be speculative, take a Scion, take a look, and see what turns up.
Great. So let's see. 2, return target basic land you control. It's owner's hands. Healers. Lifelink as long as you control another cleric. There's another Shepherd of Heroes. Hack Cascade again, Shell Shield. Protag. Draw a card. Put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature. You gain 2 life. You may play an additional land card. That seems like a pretty good card. Gosh, I have no idea. So I guess my thought process is I see the second Shepherd of Heroes, but that's also a 5-mana card. The Expedition Healer at 1/1/2/2 has Vigilance, and then also, could potentially synergize with the Shepherd of Heroes and the Scion. So I would say that one seems like a pretty decent pick. The Murasa seems interesting given kind of the cards that I have. But I would still kind of think that maybe the Healer, the Heroes, and then I'm curious because Scale of the Heights seems like a really decent card to me. Getting to gain life, drop another land, and draw a card, and a 1/1 counter. That seems pretty good for 3 mana.
Yeah, Scale's okay. I think Scale's the kind of card you want if you are doing something else with it. Like if a counter matters for synergy, if a life matters for synergy, if ramping matters for big threats. This is a very interesting pack. So this is a good inflection point. A lot of times you'll hit a point in the draft where okay, which path, choose my own adventure. Am I going to page 45? Am I going to page 93? Where are we going right now? So this one here, we have the inflection point, I think, is between the Root Gazer and then Shepherd of Heroes, perhaps Healer if you want to keep your curve low. Root Gazer fits very well into like a green-white landfall deck. I'm pretty sure it's the Signpost uncommon for green-white, because it's 2/3 for 2 with Vigilance, which is a great rate. That's an excellent. That's over the curve as far as rate goes. We're gonna get 2/3 with an ability and then another ability, which is great. And it has the ability to kind of recur landfall every turn, where you can just bounce your lands. It can also instant speed landfall, so they like block your bailout with a 4/4, and you go whoop and put a land in and pump it, which is kind of cool too. So definitely
does the tap on the first, you may put a basic land card from your hand under the battlefield. That's like that means a second land.
Yes. So there's playing a land, which is an action you can do once a turn, and then anything else that would just put a land into play is just putting a land into play. It's like a separate action. So the Scale Heights card, Root Gazer can all just put a land in, and that can happen on your opponent's turn. You can just like tap on your opponent's turn and put a land in, so you can use the bailout defensively. You can sneak it, and then of course it can bounce lands, which means you can keep reusing your landfall effects over and over.
Right. Yeah.
So the Root Gazer is a very, very solid card, both on rate and then as an archetype card. So I think this is the point we need to decide: are we green-white sort of like landfall aggro, or do we want to stay in with black and do like the life gain stuff? Now it's important to note there are 0 black cards in this pack, and there are 4 green cards. So on volume alone, now again, most of the cards taken have been rares and uncommons, but there's still a lot of volume there. Maybe it was 1 black card in the pack that was already taken, kind of thing. And the Visionary is also very solid. It's not as good as a card like Owlbear or Serap's Packmate, but it is still quite good. But it's more of like a value kind of card. I think that we want to be a little more aggressive. I think that the card is very, very solid, but I think if you're taking a green card here, it's probably going to be Root Gazer. So I think the question here is Root Gazer or possibly Shepherd of a 2-drop. I think it'll probably be Shepherd of a 2-drop. So the question is, do you want to stay in green-white, or do you want to go with keep trying the black-white life gain thing? And I would say also that the black-white life gain theme is more intensive. There are more moving parts. The cards aren't necessarily good, where if you get the awesome, black-white life gain deck, your deck will be great. But if you don't get all the pieces, you kind of just have like cards that are all just semi-medium. Whereas a card like Canopy Bailout is just kind of fine anyway. And if you get to do landfall stuff, even better. So
So my thought is that drafting for me is also going to serve as a way to kind of get out of my comfort zone, right? Like when I'm just playing basic ranked or play, I'm playing the decks that these are the styles that I truly enjoy the most. So a white green is probably a deck type that I've never played and am interested in better understanding. So I would probably lean more towards that, just as an exploratory. Like, I would not normally probably put together a deck like this, so this would be a great opportunity to learn and hopefully pick up some knowledge by playing something that I don't normally play. So,
sweet. And I think it's a correct pick. I think that it's a pretty good signal. It's a 5th pick. Pretty clear signal. Green white's open. There's a lot of white cards and green cards too. So I'm pretty happy being in green white. And then if we don't play Scion of a Swarm, totally fine. Not a big deal.
Right. All right. I went in. All right. So 6th pick, and let's see. So Allied Assault, 2 targets get XX into turn. X is the number of creatures in your party. So I'm just like, I love these cards, and maybe that's because I'm a novice, but I just feel like having these types of cards is almost like an extra parachute, especially because anyway. So let's see, Dauntless Unity.
They are very good because they sort of solve that problem of you don't want to flood, but your land's also just like not a great spell, but a very, very passable spell.
That's the reason I probably would have been like, I like this type, but a 5 mana, especially when I'm already looking at my curve, it's a little rough. Dauntless Unity, Celebrant, which is another cleric. Creatures enter the battlefield under control, you gain 1 life. So that looks to be pretty good. I'm putting that high up there. The top 4 cards, 2 in your hands, rest in your body, lose 2 life. When he dies, put a 1 counter. That's just a 4/3 with nothing. Sneaking Guide. So my thoughts are the core Celebrant is kind of where I feel like I'm gravitating towards. 1/4, 3 mana, a cleric, gain life, kind of fits into what I've got already.
So if we had taken the life gain page, if we got a page 99 last pick, I would agree with you. I think that the Celebrant is definitely one of the key cards for the life gain deck. But I think we're on page 45. So I think we are pretty set now in being sort of like a green white kind of aggro deck. And I think that any good spell land is also just like super super high value. So I think the Stampede is like pretty easily the pick here. I think we're gonna be.
I want to because my and that's great. Like I want to explore the why a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I feel like this is a pretty good bailout card, right? You get the land, maybe you have the sorcery. The sorcery seems a little expensive for a 2/2. Is that like a bad take or?
No, you're absolutely correct. On rate, McKindy Stampede is not an amazing card. If the back of McKindy Stampede was a regular Magic back, if it was this, the card would not be very good. It would be a card you probably wouldn't play. But once you staple in the flexibility where it's just a land, it's just part of your mana base, now you're thinking of it more as a land that has this extra upside of like, well, sometimes I'm going to have 4 creatures in play and just cast this and win the game.
Right.
And that's a really, really powerful element to have from a card that can just be a land too.
Okay.
Can I read the Root Gazer real fast?
Yeah, sorry. Where is the Root
Gazer? In our deck already. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, your Root Gazer only returns basics. So my chat was like, you can return the Stampede and then cast it. And then that would be too good, I think. So yeah, Root Gazer only can return basic lands. But still, I think Stampede's definitely the pick here. I think that any spell land that is even remotely reasonable is very, very good, and the flexibility that it gives you. If our mana base ends up being like, maybe 14 or 15 basic lands, a Crawling Barrens, and 3 spell lands, I'm going to be really, really happy. So.
Okay. All right. Cool.
And there are some effects that will bounce any land that also play very well with these, and those effects are usually found in green and white because green and white's the landfall color. So this is the kind of pick where if we had gone the life gain path, it's definitely Celebrant. But now we're kind of like we're on this path right now. If given a reason to deviate, we will. But for the moment, this is the lane that we're in, and we're going to keep staying in this lane.
All right, that makes sense. All right, this is great. Relic Amulet. Cast an interest. Wizards of Rage counter. Okay. Practice tactics. Choose target attack and block a creature. Deals damage to that creature equal to twice the number of creatures in your party. Riptide. Sneaking Guy. Gnarlid Colony is kicked. It enters the battlefield with 2/1/1 counters. Each creature you control with the 1/1 counter on it has trample. Netterpot, landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Attach it to target creature. Creature is flying, and then the Pack Beast again. Well, if I look at just color combos and kind of focus on that first, tactics deals damage to that. Choose target attacking or blocking creature. Instance, it deals damage to that creature equal to twice the number of creatures in the party. Okay. If I had 3, 6. Right now, I think I only have clerics. So, right, the party mechanic, just so that I'm clear, is like wizard, cleric, warrior. I'm missing something.
Rogue, yeah.
Right. That represents a party, right? A creature is not.
Those types are only the party. It's actually the Stonework Pack Beast is actually like lists what the party is: cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard.
There you go.
Because it like stands in as any one of them.
Okay. So we've got the Colony, which is a 2 mana with a kicker. If it was kicked, it has 2 additional counters. You get the trample. I don't think I have anything. Well, I do. I have the landfall that puts counters as well as...
It's important to note that landfall triggers are not counters. So a creature getting a temporary buff to end of turn is just a buff.
It has to be. Okay.
Right, whereas a counter is like an actual dice that goes in the card, and it's a permanent thing. So Crawling Barrens has counters on it. We count for that.
Yeah.
But
So I think I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Gnarlid Colony.
Okay, so why not the Nectar Pot? What is the Nectar Pot is like a 1/3. It has landfall effect. We're kind of like a landfall deck. Why would you want the colony over the Nectar Pot?
I mean, I guess you're right. I guess I'm valuing the idea of being able to put 1/1 counters, getting the trample bonus kind of from that, versus, if I have one of those and say the canopy out at the same time, yes, I'm gaining a life and I'm getting the 2/2 counters. So I guess it's more probably because I tend to go towards, well, I personally tend to gravitate more towards buff them up and kick the hell out of them rather than, give myself one life. So that's
You're absolutely right. Chat's giving me the old Jim, the classic teacher move. Jim's going. So you're absolutely correct. So
Okay.
I think taking colony here is by far the correct pick. So it's an easy trap spot though because the Nectar Pot it has the word landfall on it. We're going to be a landfall deck. Don't want the landfall card in our deck. And Gnarlid Colony is more of a synergy card. I believe I think it's the blue-green theme in this set is all about +1/+1 counters. I'm not actually sure offhand, but that's a thematic thing. However, the big issue here is rate. So Nectar Pot is a 1/3 for 2, which is not very good, and it gains 1 life for each land drop, which is realistically not that much. Whereas Gnarlid Colony is a 2/2 for 2, which is fine. We can totally that's the base rate. That is your bread and butter limited card. But it also has a bonus where if you have 5 mana later in the game, it's a 4/4. And it has trample, so if you have no other card in your entire deck, you can almost just erase the text on it. It talks about +1/+1 counters and just think this is either a 2/2 for 2 or a 4/4 trample for 5. And both of those are very reasonable. The flexibility is even better. And then if I happen to use this +1/+1 counter synergy as a bonus, great. And that's the kind of limited card that's really, really good. Colin is a fantastic 2-drop because it checks off all the boxes. It's good on rate. It's good early. It's good late. And on top of all that, it has synergy. All Nectar Pot has is synergy. And the payoff isn't even that good. So, very, very good. I'm very glad you recognized that Colony was a more important card than Nectar Pot. So, Colony's great.
Awesome. Good. Alrighty. So, let's see. We got another cleric with kicker. Battle taps of his kick. Tap up 2 target creatures. The kicker would be 4 mana. Infiltrator. Cinderclasm. Dauntless Unity. I think we saw one of these creatures you control get 1/1 till end of turn. As spells kick, those creatures get 2/1. Again, so end of turn does not count as a counter either.
Correct. Yeah, it just temporary buff.
Got to be a permanent.
There are very, very few cards in Magic that will give a creature a buff for forever. They're always usually counters. Then they're very old, obscure cards. If an effect's ever going to be permanent, it's usually displayed by +1/+1 counters.
Okay. And then Dauntless Survivor and another Nectar Pot. So again, kind of using the same thought process as last time. 1 control. Dauntless Survivor is 2 mana for a 1/1, but you do get the 1/1 counter on a target creature. I assume that also then means himself. That would definitely kind of synergize with the rest. But I'm also just thinking that maybe the cleric is a potential too. I mean, being able to tap 2 creatures on the kick is good. It's flying. It's 1 mana 1/1. I again, like my own sort of way that I would like to play is I think I would gravitate more towards the Survivor. There's another opportunity to drop a counter. So I could see going both ways on this one, I guess.
I think that the Survivor is the correct pick here. This is a kind of unexciting pack. I think once again we've recognized that Nectar Pot is not a very good Magic card. Survivor is just better than Nectar Pot. Not as good as Gnarlid Colony is, but still a good card. And the Cleric, the reality is that on rate, a 1/1 flyer for 1, unless you have something else to synergize with it. So for example, in Kaldheim, there was like a 1/2 flyer for one with first strike. That was actually really good because it was all about equipment. And you put the pick on it that made treasure every turn onto your flyer, and now you're getting it every turn. But you need something else for your 1/1 flyer to be good, and being able to like maybe tap things is like it's okay, but not particularly great. Survivor is not like a great card, but it's fine. It's a bear. At worst, it's a bear. That's the floor. And the floor being a bear is always reasonable. And then like it can pump a creature up and help combat. There's a little bit of synergy with the colony as well, where maybe you like put a counter on your Baloth, play a land, have colony out, and give it trample. So that it's a kind of thing where the synergy, kind of like Gnarled Colony, the synergy doesn't need to happen. But if your deck has this little pocket of synergy where it has like a few cards that deal with counters that are all good by themselves, that's cool. That's fine. You don't need to be a full theme, So Survivor here is totally reasonable. It's a card that like it could maybe get cut from our deck if our deck's really good. But as far as the cards in this pack, it is the best card.
Okay. Yep. All right. That makes sense. Relic Axe, Cliffhaven Sellsword, Smite the Monstrous, Historic Target Creature, Chill Depths, Duelist, and then Nectar Pot.
The old Nectar Pot's always there.
Yeah.
It's like cockroach.
So we don't have any removal. I feel like we're going towards green-white. My thought is like leaning towards removal. Now, it is limited removal, power 4 or greater, but definitely some comfort considering some of the other cards I have. I feel like anything with a power 4 or less can be taken care of by my creatures. So Smite the Monstrous is probably where I'm gravitating towards here.
So Smite's the kind of card where it's a little difficult in a best of one draft because it's more of a sideboard card than a main deck card. There are definitely formats where you're happy main decking it. That's very, very contextual to how the format looks. So, for example, the Ikoria format, one of the big things in that format was like big creatures and mutate. So like mutating onto your creature to make it bigger. So in that format, the Smite the Monstrous effect was like pretty reasonable to main deck because there was usually something big. In this format, I'm honestly not familiar enough with the format to know what those like inflection points are. It's probably an okay to main deck. And you're also correct that we are green-white. So our options for removal are going to be somewhat limited. So your options here are basically, do I want a pretty mediocre 2-drop in Cliffhaven Sellsword, which is fine, but not a card I'm excited to play, or Smite the Monstrous, which is a much higher upside card, but can also just not be good. I think thinking this Smite here is totally fine. I think that like we already have 3 2-drops, and the Sellsword is probably going to be our worst one, even at the end of a draft. So take the Smite. We might not play it. We'll see how desperate we are for removal. If we pick up a better removal spell or two, probably won't play it. If it's our only removal spell, we can play it. We also have some like silly backdoor options of like Dauntless Survivor, put a counter on their creature and then kill it, which is like a cute possible thing. But so I think this Smite here is very, very reasonable. It might not make our deck, but none of these other cards probably will either. So it's totally fine to take the card with the higher upside. I think that in best of 1 draft doesn't matter as much, but in best of 3 draft, when you have a sideboard, taking these sort of sideboard cards pretty high is pretty important because you'd much rather have a B+ card in your sideboard that can come in 40% of the time and be good, and then a C- card that might not even make your deck because it's just the idea of value over replacement. Cliffhaven Sellsword is a dime a dozen. There's a million bad 2-drops you can play, but Smite the Monstrous is a pretty unique effect, even if it is narrow.
Someone in my chat, TGM, who's recently been playing Magic as well, just said, "Wait, you could put a counter on the opponent's creatures." Yeah, I mean, like that's one of the things that I think makes Magic. We talked the other night about like it being a puzzle game, right? Like you almost have to be thinking beyond what you can do to your creatures because those are absolutely those scenarios where it's like, oh, actually, if I do use this, like just like the example Jim gave, use the Survivor to pump it up, and then that lets you then activate another card. One of the reasons why I think this game's awesome.
Yeah, finding those cool plays is like the best part of Magic. Just like using your card in a very kind of weird way of like, well, I'm gonna buff your creature, and they're like, what? And kill it, haha, kind of thing is super cool.
Right, yeah. Well, we got another Sellsword. We got the Ox making their return. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, tap target creature. We've got Defender Reach. We've seen. Oh, so I think this is the pack that we're back to. Maybe I don't know. Adventure awaits. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them. Put them in your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library. If you didn't put a card in your hand this way, draw a card. And then enchant land. Enchant land is a 4/4 elemental creature with reach and haste. It's still a land. When it dies, return that card to its owner hand. I mean, both those greens seem, and well, I mean, the Ox still seems pretty reasonable. Adventure awaits gives me some draw. And
it's important to note that this is a common misconception. Adventure awaits
Okay.
is not card draw. Adventure awaits is card selection. So
if you didn't put a card in your hand this way, draw a card. Yeah.
right. So it does draw you a card, but only a card. So it only replaces itself. So typically, imagine we refer to that as card selection. So it's a way to smooth out their hands. But realistically, you're playing Adventure awaits. It goes away, and you get a card to replace it. So you didn't really accrue any actual material. You just improved the material that you had at a cost of mana, though, because it costs mana. So I think it's an important distinction to make, because card draw is good and limited. You know, if you have a card that just says 3 mana, draw 2 cards, like that puts you up a card, similar to a scenario of, you know, they double block and you kill a creature and get a 2-for-1. Draw 2 is just a 2-for-1. You just play a card and get 2 cards, you know. Right. And you're spending mana on it, so there's a cost there. But Adventure awaits only being card selection for 2 mana is like just not really that great. It's not really worth the time spent casting it.
So then, I mean, to accompany landfall, then maybe the Ox would be the right go here for 4 or 5 mana, but being able to tap target creature opens up a lot of options whenever land comes in. So
yeah, I think Ox is actually ideal for us because it does a number of things for us, right? On rate, it's a 4/4 for 5. That's like, all right, that's fine, you know. But the big thing about Ox is that our deck is going to be landfalling, somewhat aggressive, and then lacking in removal because we're green-white. So Ox serves all of our purposes it has landfall triggers, which is good for us. I mean, we have good ways to do that. It pushes through blockers. It's a decent size. To the point where, like, Ox could even be better than Shepherd of Heroes in our deck. Maybe. You know, in a vacuum, Shepherd is much better overall. But because the Ox plays pretty well with our deck, it's also important to note that now these are the packs coming back to us, right? This is pick 10. So the last pack was our opening pack. This is our second pack. And seeing all these green and white cards is a very, very good sign that green and white is open too. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. I think the Ox is definitely the pick.
Okay. All right. 11. So disenchant, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and then we've got 2 black cards and the Sentinel, Flying Descender. So I mean, I'm assuming disenchant falls in the removal bucket. I would probably go with that.
I think as a disenchant is, you're not going to main deck disenchant in most formats because there just aren't enough artifacts or enchantments, and we are playing best of 1. This is actually a spot where I would take the Blight Priest. So we are still not, you know, we're still on page 95 or whatever I said. You know, we're definitely in this green-white landfall thing. But there's a possibility we backdoor into something else. And we're not playing Disenchant in our main deck. We're not playing any other cards in our main deck. This card's actually pretty solid if you have a life gain deck. So if we were to all of a sudden pack 2, open some really good black life gain kind of rare, or some black life gain rare, we can look at our cards and say, listen, you know, Colony, Survivor are both fine. Root Gauge is pretty good. Bailout's fine. But I could take this black bomb rare and maybe move into black-white and have that be an option to us too. So this is the kind of spot where it's really important just to leave as many doors open as possible. And Blight Priest kind of helps to leave that door open.
Yeah, so what I also take away from there is that maybe it should be like, from a situational perspective, right? Disenchant has very, very limited options in which I am able to use it, right? I mean, yes, someone might have a target artifact or enchantment, but if like I might have 1 out of 20 times the opportunity to use this card versus this, which could open up a lot more options, right? That I should lean more towards the more opportunistic pick. Right.
Odds are you're not going to end up putting Marauding Blight Priest in our deck. You know, most of the time we're not going to open a black rare. We're going to stay green white, and that's that. However, an even larger part of the time, we're not playing Disenchant in any of our main decks. You know, I think that if you're playing Disenchant in your main deck, your draft went really, really wrong, and you were absolutely desperate for a playable. And Disenchant is the kind of card where if it does work in the game, it's probably going to be very good. So it's gonna kill an equipment in combat. It's gonna kill like a pacifism effect to like unlock your creature so it can block. But it's also gonna be dead a large part of the time too. So
Yeah,
I think
that
Blight
makes
Priest is
a lot of
reasonable.
sense.
The artifact of Skyclave Sentinel is like it's okay, but very very off our plan. Also, it's just like a 2/3 blocker, and if you have a
Right.
whole bunch of mana later, it can be a flyer. But we don't really want a blocker at all. We don't really want to have a bunch of lands in plays. It doesn't really, it's a card that like it could functionally go in our deck, but isn't very good. So I think plays Priest here is the pick.
Okay. All right. This is amazingly helpful. All right, we're back to it. The Mesa Links 2, Negate, and Broken Wings. So, I mean, following the same kind of thought process, Broken Wings is probably very situational. Artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Negate doesn't really seem to fit in at all. So I kind of think Mesa Links is probably the choice here.
Yeah, I'd be much happier playing Broken Wings in my main deck than Disenchant, because obviously it's a wider spread of things it can hit. But I'm very happy taking a 2-drop here. We've been a little speculative, so we have some cards in our pile we're not going to play. And also, McKinley Stampede is like sort of a land. Crawling Barrens is an actual land, so that cuts down. We have 11 playable cards, but 2 of them are black, 2 of them are lands. So we actually have about 7 playables at the moment. So we want to make sure we have enough playables. So I think that Mesa Links is totally reasonable here. Also, it's pretty likely we'll see another Broken Wings at some point in another late pick. So, you would never ever play 2 Broken Wings in your deck. So,
right,
value above replacement here. I much rather just have the OK 2-drop.
Okay, 2-drop it is. And Might of Marasa. Target creature gets 3/3. If it is kicked, gets 5/5. And then the scale, the heights. Gosh, both seem pretty good. I mean, frankly, 3/3 for 2 mana seems pretty sick on its own. To be able to get a 5/5 at the end, feel like that could synergize with a lot. What's in here? So I do keep going back to Scale of Heights. I'm like, I really seem to like this card.
Yeah, I think you're overvaluing Scale a little bit because it does have a lot of words on it. But I also think that Scale is the pick here. I think that the Might of Marasa, any trick for 2 mana doesn't really do anything but buff the creature, is usually just like kind of unexciting. I'd rather have like a 1 green for like a +2/+2 because the efficiency is really important. If you attack on turn 4 and they block your creature and you have to play Might of Marasa, now you can't play your 4-drop, because it's just not that efficient. So while I'd be okay having a pick or two, a pump spell or two in my deck, Might's kind of okay. And Scale just replaces itself. We have a lot of 2-drops. We just go 2-drop. Turn 3 we can Scale, put a counter on it, put a land into play a 5-drop the next turn. So I think Scale is reasonable. We might not play it, but I think Scale is reasonable in this deck. We're also kind of landfalling, and we have some 5-drops in our deck too. So I think Scale is very reasonable. I think that the things you want for Scale to be good are a good density of 2-drops and then a good density of 4 and 5-drops. And we have that at the moment. So not a card that I'm like stoked to play, but I think in our deck it does make sense.
All right. That makes sense. And then we don't really have
vanilla
much choice here.
4/3. That can go into our sideboard.
Okay. So this is new pack, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, pack 2.
Oh yeah, it's pack 2 right up there. So Zagreus, Fearless Fledging, landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, put a +1 counter. It gains flying until the end of the turn. Black Relic Golem can't attack or block unless an opponent has 8 or more grave guards. Target mill, bubble snare, duelist, deadly alliance, another priest. Guide Dancer, another Dauntless Survivor, another Mersara, and another Blight Blade. Gosh. Well, so, I mean, immediately I think there's a question of, like, is this an opportunity where you actually just steal the Zagreus just to, like, not give it to anyone else?
Now, it's important to remember that we're playing in a pod draft. Well, I'm sorry, this is
So
actually a
it
bot
doesn't
draft,
matter.
but
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
in a bot draft, there actually aren't other players to pass to. But even in a regular pod draft, it's very, very unlikely we're going to play against the person next to us. In an F&M draft or a tournament draft, it's more possible. But when you're going to hate draft a card, you got to look what the opportunity cost is versus the card you're not taking. And I think there's a very, very good card for us in this pack.
Yeah. Well, I mean, based off of what we've got, Fledging, 2 mana with landfall, gets the counters on it. It gains flying, which also means it would have trample under the right conditions and landfall. So I mean, I think that this is the clear choice here.
Yeah, Fledgling is phenomenal. Like, it's a perfect card for us. It's a landfall card. It's a 2-drop. It's also a card that scales. And this is an important concept in Limited. Cards that scale as the game goes on are very, very valuable because they always can outpace the current state of the game. A card like Canopy Bailoff is always going to be a 4/3 or a 6/5. I guess occasionally you could play 2 lands. But for the most part, that's just the size that it is. A Gnarled Colony is going to be a 2/2 or a 4/4. It's kind of just it. But when the board gets gummed up and neither player can attack profitably, the Fledgling will just keep growing and growing and scaling and scaling. And eventually, the cards that scale will eventually scale over the top and then be able to overcome whatever the current board is. So any card that has a scaling ability like this is just already phenomenal. And then this card is just great in general. It's cheap. It grows every turn. It attacks for 2 in the air on turn 3. It has flying. It has counters for the Gnarled Colony. It has a landfall. It's just got everything. So this card's absolutely perfect for us. Just a good quality 2-drop is like exactly what you want. Like the value above replacement on a card like Fearless Fledgling over our Mesa Links is astronomical. It's astronomical.
Right.
So this card's great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too when you compare it to like the Mesa Links because you can clearly tell like Fledgling, it's little goofy bird's the way to go. Okay, so Fledgling then. All right, going through another Ox, prowling, vigilance, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, put a 1/1 counter on prowling. Drain. Visionary. 4 mana, draw a card, 3/2. Cast for each creature in your party. I feel like the prowling Felidar is definitely up there in terms of options. I think that if I'm trying to play through in terms of like, okay, now that we've kind of established, if I was just playing this and Jim wasn't here and I'm just like choosing what I would choose, I feel like Felidar is the one I would go with.
Yeah, this is a tough pick, I think, because the Feldar is right in our wheelhouse. It's a semi-aggressive landfall creature with benefits. I think that the issue here is that the Visionary on the bottom left is a much better card in a vacuum, and the Feldar is the kind of card where if things are going right, it's going to be very good. We play it. We play land drop. It starts to grow. The problem is like the turn we cast it, because you gotta remember we can't play it on turn 4 and then also play a land. So the turn we cast it, it's just a 2/3, which is not a very good. That's a very, very poor rate for 4 mana. And the next turn we play a land. Now it's a 3/4 vigilance. That's pretty reasonable, but that initial turn of casting is not great. But so if our mana curve was worse, if we had less 2-drops, I would be unexciting. Whereas Visionary is just always good. It's a very, very solid card. This is a spot where if I had more experience with the format, I'd have a better idea of what I'd want here. My gut says Visionary, just on like raw power, although Feldar probably seems like it would be better for the deck in theory. But the Visionary is certainly much safer.
I think it's really helpful when you put it in the context of when could you play this card, right? Because it's helpful to me to go like, yeah, that's very true. Because looking at the board, I can kind of get an idea on what I might have out, and then how many times I find myself in a situation where it's like I've got 1 or 2 cards in my hands, would love some sort of draw. Like I can understand that. So that actually explanation makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, my chat is saying that Feldar is actually pretty good in this format. And again, like having not played them for much myself, I definitely am not like exactly sure which is which. So I think we're gonna leave Feldar here. You can play Feldar on turn 5 and then play a land immediately and make it a 3/4. But of course that makes it more of like a 5-drop than a 4-drop. You know, so it's the kind of card that like as far as sequencing goes, we may end up playing it on like turn 6, where you just go like turn 6, play this, play a land, play a 2-mana creature, and then say go. So Feldar is certainly the more logical card for the deck. And again, my chat's being like, hey, Visionary wasn't that good in this format. Feldar is pretty good. So I think we'll take Feldar here and be pretty happy about it.
Okay.
I'll defer to my chat. They're once in a while, in a great while, they're correct. So
Thanks, Jim's chat.
Yeah.
All right. Legendary creature, raising a spells your opponent casts the target. Okay. Marasa Sproutling. 2-mana kicker enters the battlefield as this kick. Return target card with a kicker ability from your graveyard to your hand. Veteran Adventurer, Vigilance. Veteran Adventurers also party. Okay. The Celebrant is back. Into Cognition. Research. Yeah, so this is I'm gonna be honest with you, Jim. This is like one of those where it's like I really don't know. Like if I look at it, it's like, okay, what do we have in the deck? Like looking at the options, I'm obviously not going to be picking into red or blue at this point. I'm feeling pretty good on like my higher end creatures, so I might be right. I do have a couple spells with kickers, but not enough to go like, oh, Veteran Adventurers is something I absolutely need in my deck. I meant to say it on Sproutling. As far as Adventures, 5/5 for 6 mana. Vigilance is pretty great. Don't really have anything that affects the party, I don't think, or if I do, it's very limited. I don't know that I want to run 2 Scale the Heights in this scenario. So I'm kind of, this is where I'm at this point where if I was drafting on my own, I would be really, really lost. Like I would love some thoughts on how I might want to approach this one based off of what I've got already in my deck, what I'm seeing in front of me. What would my, help me with the thought process here.
So this is a spot where we can go back to our basics. This is entirely a rate pick, right? So at this point, we were speculating that maybe if Pack 2 opened weird, we would shift. But at this point, it seems pretty clear. Our deck is open. We're pretty locked in green-white. It would take a lot for us to really change at this point. So you're right. All the blue cards, all the black cards, all the red cards, just off the menu. Don't even have to look at them anymore, So we have 4 potential options here. Core Celebrant, we've already established, not for us. It's a synergy card for life gain decks. That's not really us. So we're looking at the three possible picks are the Sproutling, the Adventurer, and the Scale by Heights. Now, if we're looking at this solely from the perspective of, we're a landfall deck, we want Scale by Heights, then that makes the most sense. We're not a kicker deck, and we're not a party deck, so logically we want the Scale by Heights. But the issue here, of course, is rate. And again, the rate is really, really important. So on rate, Scale by Heights it's okay. It's not really particularly great. It's just sort of like it's a card we have 1 copy. We may or may not play it. It's just a kind of like a filler okay card. Sproutling is a 3/3 for 3, which is on rate totally fine. Exciting? No, not really, but very, very rock solid. A card we're not unhappy to play at all. We'll make our deck probably 9 times out of 10 just based on the general sizing. And then we also have the fact that it has kicker and we can return a kicker card. Do we have a lot of kicker cards? No. Right now we have 1. We have the Gnarled Colony. Say we end the draft with 2. However, that's a reasonable amount of like extra value where sure, 85% of the time we're going to cast Sproutling as a 3/3. But any game we kick it and happen to return a creature, that's just light years better than anything else. It's phenomenal. So now we have a 5-mana 3/3 that draws a spell also. It's 2 for 1. Very, very good. So on raw rate, Sproutling is certainly reasonable. Then we also have the Adventurer. So same idea. On rate, a 5/5 Vigilance for 6 is okay. Not really great. It's fine. a little more that I like to spend for it, but honestly, it's not that bad. And then if we have one party member of any kind in play, it's a 5-mana 5/5 Vigilance, which is actually very good. That's a very solid card on rate. And God's Bid never costs 4. Now we're just through the roof. Now we have a 4-mana 5/5 Vigilance, which is unbelievable. So, quick glance at our creatures here. I believe Survivor's a warrior. I think that the Shepherd's a cleric. We don't really have many party things at all. Will we end up with one or two more? Maybe. Probably not. So it just comes down to, would I rather have this 3-mana 3/3 or this 5.5 mana, 5/5 Vigilance?
Right.
And I think I'd rather have the Sproutling. I think our deck is fairly aggressive. We do have some ramp a little bit, and we are definitely, I don't think playing a 6-mana creature is outlandish in our deck, but we only have 1 3-drop, so it fills out the curve. And again, in a longer, grindier game, if this thing just happens to return a Gnarled Colony, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really, really good. So I think I would lean Saproling here, or Sproutling. I think if we had, maybe 2 or 3 more creatures of various types, and we could pretty reliably cast Adventurer for 5, I'd be more about it. But we do have Makindi Ox at 5. We have Shepherd of Heroes at 5. We have Makindi Stampede occasionally at 5. Beowulf at 4. Feldar at 4. The top parts of our curve are pretty reasonable at this point, so I'd much rather, for curve considerations, have Sproutling. But this is 100% an issue of just rate. Of just kind of looking at the cards, understanding that, there's two main factors, right? There's the synergy and the rate, and while we are drafting for synergy, a card like Fearless Fledgling is great in our deck because it hits all of our buttons. That card's also good on rate too, and there's times where the synergy isn't high enough, and you just draft on rate instead.
Yeah, the part I think that is helpful in everything that you just said for me personally is, separating the kicker bonus from what the card is at its base. And exactly. I think that's probably where I was too focused on what is the kicker bonus. Yeah, that might work, but in reality, just what I get base out of this card is pretty reasonable. So having the bonus on top of what is pretty reasonable. Anyway, that just kind of giving you my thought process, because that's super helpful. So it makes a lot of sense. Sproutling it is. All right. Then kind of focusing once again on sort of our greens. The scale, the heights just keeps popping up. I'm going backwards. Reclaim the Waste. Kicker 3. Search your library for a basic land card. Reveal it. Put it in your hand. If the spell is kicked, search your library for 2 basic land cards instead of 1. Seems pretty great for a landfall deck. The Pickaxe. When the Pickaxe enters battlefield, attached to target creature you control. So no equip cost, which is 1/1 or a 1 mana with no equip cost, and then it gets landfall whenever a land enters the battlefield under control. Equipped creature gets 2/2 until the end of turn. So this actually seems like a tough choice, and maybe it's not, right? Because I feel like Reclaim the Waste can actually go in. The Pickaxe seems really good, especially if I can get that on one of my other creatures that has landfall as well, or have other creatures with landfall out. And then also not paying an equip cost seems pretty great. I've already got an Ox, and we've talked about Smite. So my thoughts are that the Skyclave Pickaxe is a good choice here.
So the big thing here is that looking over at the Waste card, a common mistake I think that players make is they read the card, but they don't think about actually casting the card. They think about just getting the effect. So yeah, I mean, drawing 2 lands is cool for our landfall. I get to fix our mana. It's technically card advantage. We have two cards for 1. We'll have a bunch of lands to make our landfall effects. The problem is we actually have to cast this card. And 4 mana to spend our entire turn 4 to not affect the board any way at all and just put 2 lands into our hand. Now it's not so appealing, because we're not just thinking about it as the effect, thinking about it as the cost. And the cost is to not play a creature on turn 4, to not advance our board on turn 4, play a removal spell on turn 4, play a pump spell, and whatever else it is. Magic's very much a game, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, of being on the board. So any play that you're going to make that's not going to have any effect on the board has to be very good, And I think Reclaim the Waste is definitely a playable card. I think it's more of a card for either a deck that wants to splash a color, or a kicker deck that has bonuses for kicking spells, or a deck that just has removal spells and big expensive things and is okay paying 4 mana for a 2-for-1. But I think on the whole, this card would be pretty underwhelming in our deck. We would probably cast it for 1 most of the time, and we're not really splashing a color or have any reason to like find a basic land. So I think Reclaim's the kind of card where it's a bit of a trap where the notion of casting it seems nice, but you do have to cast it. That's kind of the problem with the Feldar also that I was a little concerned with, where if it's in play, it's great, the Prowling Feldar that we already have. Right. If it's in play, it's great. It's a 2/3, it's a landfall creature, but there is that turn you do need to cast it. And I think that the Feldar makes, it's a board presence in some way, but it's kind of small. So you play it that turn, it's probably not blocking. So it's not really affecting the board until the next turn, and then it needs more to affect the board too. Like I still think it's fine, but that was my interpretation with that card and why I was a little hesitant on it because of that notion to a lesser extent. But a card like a sorcery that just puts 2 lands in your hand for 4 mana definitely doesn't affect the board at all. So, I'm actually I was hoping chat would help me out here. I don't know how good Pickaxe is. I think it's pretty good, but like it's the kind of card that could look good and not actually be good. So if chat wants to help me out a little bit, let me know how good this card was in this format. I would be very much appreciative of that. It definitely looked like a card that would go very well into our deck. Probably play it on turn 3 before playing a land. On a 2-drop, play a land, get it for 4. It does seem very, very good, but the issue is that like it's gonna go soft pretty quick as far as we don't have any lands to make land drops and stuff like that. Swingy is a good word. I feel like swingy is definitely a very good word. Where in an absolute ideal scenario, this card is going to murder people. But that means you've drawn the exact perfect mix of a creature on turn 2, the axe itself.
Which only happens to my opponents, never to me.
Of course, exactly. That's how Magic goes. So, so it's definitely a swingy card. I don't think there's a card in this pack that I'm really excited about otherwise, though. And we do have the Root Razor to kind of help have consistent landfalls. I'm not interested in a second Ox. I'm not interested in a second, whatever that card on the bottom left is, the Scale the Heights. There's been a Scale the Heights in basically every pack. That's for a reason. It's not a super desirable card. We already have a Smite, we already have an Ox. So I think we're taking the Pickaxe here. We'll see if we play it or not. But, if we have some flyers, it's good on Fledgling. But I think there's a chance we don't play it. But no other card really interests me at all. So high upside pick, and we'll see where it takes us.
Okay. We have another Pickaxe. We have a Angel Heart Protector, 3. There's battlefield. Target creature you control gains indestructible to the end of the turn. There's a 3/2. Another Lynx. Another Colony. And a Stomper. When the Stomper enters battlefield, return up to 2 lands you control to the owner's hands. Well, okay. So based off of the Sky Pickaxe, not sure how that's going to work. Having 2 in the hand doesn't necessarily seem like that's putting me in any sort of advantageous position overall, especially based off the other picks we have. Protector seems decent for 3 mana. You get indestructible, 3/2, but that's kind of like all of it comes out on the pop. Missile Links. Right, I guess like if I wanted to build out a lower mana curve, having a second Colony seems like it wouldn't be terrible, and Stomper seems, I guess, decent, especially for like a later game when we wouldn't be having as many lands likely to come out. It gives us the ability to do that, but it's still kind of limited. Also have already high mana curve, so. I would probably say pick up another Colony.
So I think Colony is good, but Stomper I think is the card we want here. Stomper is like the perfect top end card for this deck. So it is.
Help me, because my mind is saying, well, I'm looking at my curve right now. Curve feels pretty heavy at the top. So what is like the tipping point for me? What are you seeing? Should I be looking at to go, yes, it's worth it to have yet another potential 6 mana in the deck?
I think that the first thing we should do is clean up our deck a little bit. So let's go over to our deck. Let's drag the black cards to our sideboard and the Smite the Monstrous and clean things up a little bit so you have a better look.
DLP. I love this.
Thanks, Aph. I appreciate it. So cut all black cards. I think Smite the Monstrous can go on our board as well. There you go. And then I think for the most part, we might not play the links to the axe, but this is fine for now. These are all the cards we might play. So right now we have 2 5-drops in McKindy, Ox, and Shepherd of Heroes. We have 2 4-drops in Feldar and Baloth. Stampede doesn't really count as a 5-drop. It's more a land than anything else. So our top end is it's okay. It's more not like over the bar at any point, And we have no 6-drops currently as well. Now, Stomper, however, is like the premium 6-drop for this deck. So on rate alone, a 6/5 trample for 6 it's fine. I think a 6/6 for 6 trample is like kind of like the baseline. But a 6/5 trample for 6 is pretty reasonable. But we got to think again about how his game's going to play out. So we're landfalling, we're turn 2 fledgling. Turn 3, play a land, landfall, attack, play a sproutling. Turn 4, landfall, attack, play a whatever. When we hit like turn 6-ish, we're kind of out of lands, so we don't necessarily have the extra landfall effects to keep our cards going. So if our opponent's able to stop our initial push, now we're going to stall out a little bit. We don't really want to draw a land on turn 7 or 8 because we kind of want to draw spells, but now our cards are a little weaker. So Stomper just does basically everything we could ever want. It tops our curve. It keeps all of our landfall cards going. It allows us to play a card like McKindy Stampede or any other creature land early and then pop it back to our hand. So you can almost effectively draw a card as far as like drawing a spell. It kind of just does everything we want, and we don't want like a bunch of these, but the first one, second one is going to be great. And the thing is that while like the Veteran Adventurer card from a previous pack, the 5/5 Vigilance, that card's okay as a 6-drop, but not like amazing. It's not like a super desirable card, whereas Stomper is like the desirable card for this deck, I think. And this is just a spot of like looking at how our deck's going to play out and how our end game's going to play out and kind of thinking about what problems are we going to have we need to solve. And Stomper solves basically all of them. So I think Stomper's great. I think Colony's great too. I think that the next best pick here is definitely Colony, but I think Stomper's the exact card we want for our deck.
Okay. Yeah. I think sustainability, you put it in that perspective, that makes a ton of sense to me. I feel like if I would have been thinking in that way, that probably would have been it. But that does, I understand definitely why value that one over the other. All right. Outrider, target creature gets 1/1 till the end of the turn for each creature in your party. Also a human warrior, and then another visionary and another stomper. So I assume we wouldn't necessarily want a second stomper. A second visionary. I thought I did have one. Did I not? Oh, we didn't. Am I just blind? I thought we picked one of these already.
No, we were discussing one for a bit over the Prowling Feldar and decided to go Feldar instead.
That's right. Okay. So then maybe that wouldn't be too bad a choice. Let's see. 4 mana. Enters the battlefield. Target creature gets 1/1 until end of turn for each creature in your party. So that seems pretty situational. 1 less on toughness, but draw a card. So probably either the Outrider or the Visionary. I kind of feel like based off of what we discussed already on the Visionary, that might be the way to go. Because I'm not really sure. We have already 1 warrior and a cleric. So yeah, I'd probably go Visionary.
Yeah, I think I would take Stomper here. I think Stomper is so good in our deck that I'm happy playing 2. I don't think I want a 3rd, but I do think Stomper is particularly high value. And Visionary is definitely fine. I definitely like the card. Chad is saying it lines up a little poorly in the format, which is certainly possible because like there are certain flashpoints in every format where
which card does.
What's up?
Sorry, which card did your chat say didn't?
The Visionary as a bit of an underperformer. There are certain flashpoints in every format where like certain toughnesses or powers are very important. If all the common creatures are all 4 toughness or less, then like a kill spell that does 4 damage is very good. Perhaps 5 of it is a flashpoint where everything's a 4/4. So if it's 1 random 5/5 happens just to be really good because it lines up well against everything. Though you learn those sort of like flashpoints as you've drafted a lot more. So again, not super familiar with the sets. I'm not sure how well sized the 3/2 body is in Visionary. But I think the second Stomper is good here. I think that we just want a curve on turn 6. Basically, we want Stomper on turn 6 every time. And I'm happy playing 2. I will say that taking Stomper here means that we're unlikely to take any more 5 or 6 drops for the rest of a draft.
Got it.
But it also means we can value our spell lands a little higher too. So I think we're taking Stomper here, recognizing we're just not going to take any more expensive cards, but this is the kind of one we want. And I think Outrider, while it looks okay, again, sort of doesn't really pass that test. On rate, it's a 3/3 for 4, which isn't great. And then like, even if you are pumping +2/+2, say you have 2 party members with it,
Right.
it's still pretty middling. It's not like a great payoff.
Yeah.
It's similar to the Scry 3/3 for 4, where it's like it's okay but not great. So the floor is pretty low, the ceiling's not that high, so it's kind of just an card. So yeah, I think Visionary would be reasonable here too. I think Stomper is the correct pick.
All right. Makes sense. Mind Carver, Chilling Trap, Negate, Adventurer awaits, Strength of Solidarity. Choose a target creature you control. Put a 1/1 counter on it for each creature in your party. And then Spare Supplies. Draw a card. Utility Knife. Creature gets 1/1. I suppose, we talked about Adventurer Waits. If you have a creature card, we have put the rest on the bottom. If you didn't, okay. Strength Solidarity has some synergy with my deck. It's a 1 mana target creature for each creature in your party. Probably only getting a 1/1, maybe if we're lucky. A 2/2.
It's important to note that card's actually a sorcery, not an instant. So
good.
It's not really a trick.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
It's the kind of card where if this is like your super low floor but super high ceiling kind of card, where if you're like the perfect party deck and you have a party every game on turn 4 and this thing's +4/+4, it's okay. But aside from that, it's not very good.
Yeah, I need to get better about paying closer attention to that sorcery versus instant.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. It's kind of thing where like that card would make a lot of sense as an instant because most cards that give a buff like that in green are instants. So it's kind of just a weird card.
Right.
But yeah, there's no card here that's really exciting. I mean, I would be very unhappy to play any of these cards in our deck. Adventurer Waits, Spare Supplies are both just like slow, sort of like, card drawy, like whatever. I mean, like I think Spare Supplies is okay in some decks if you're like kind of grindy, but we're not grindy. We're an aggressive, straightforward landfall deck. So a lot of his cards are great. You can just take a Negate or a Mind Carver for your collection or whatever and call it a day and put it in the sideboard.
And there's no way within client to tell if actually, I think this tells me. I already have 4 of those. So I'm just going to choose to build out my collection here.
Yeah, just like grab a Negate, whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Just throw
then
it
I
in
can
the sideboard.
just move that Negate now.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Did I grab it? Why does this look like exactly the same? No, it's not, but it's pretty close.
It happens.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, let's see. Practice tactics. Choose target. We've seen this one. Block a creature, damage that creature twice the number of creatures in your party. Now, creatures in your party means they still have to be like an elf warrior or a goblin cleric or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
they have to be warrior, cleric, rogue, or
right.
the last
Whatever.
one. Was there maybe? I forgot. But yes, it has to be that type. It can be a goblin rogue or whatever. That's fine, but like it has to be a rogue. So tactics would do essentially nothing in our decks. We have like only 1 or 2 party cards, so it actually wouldn't even do anything at all. So
so that would leave then the Strength of Solidarity, which is on the last one, or Might of Marasa, which, I was kind of looking at this one earlier.
yeah, it's the kind of card that's like, I think it's okay. We're definitely taking it here. If 1 Might of Marasa ends up in our deck, I'm not unhappy with that. It's fine. It's just the kind of card that like you'll get it like this, just like late in the pack. Nothing else take really. I'll take 1. If I play it, I play it. Like it's the kind of card where like the value over replacement is just like there's there's plenty of other cards you can play. If you play it, sure, but there's no real desire to actively get it because you'll always get it in a spot like this, late in the pack. No other playables. You just kind of get it and maybe you'll play it.
That makes sense. I'm gonna go with the Might then. All right.
Speak of a devil.
Another Might, another Dauntless Survivor, and the Blight Blade. So, I would probably go with the Survivor again.
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty unexciting last few picks, just kind of
Yeah.
like some chafe, definitely, they might fill out our deck, but they might not. So,
Ox, a Gloomhunter, Mucklord, Mind Drain, Seagate, Colossus. I, I guess this is just like a pick to pick.
yeah, just the Ox. Basically these picks are sort of like if pack 3 goes heinously bad for some reason and we get like 2 playables, at least we have a deck, but realistically we're probably not playing 2 Oxen, it's so same thing here. Just, Scale the Heights, we're probably not playing 2 Scale the Heights, but we're not playing other cards either, so
all right.
yeah, Research is actually really, really good. It's a little surprising to see that card this late.
Which one?
Field Research. So like that card's really good in like kind of a slower, control-y, like red-blue or blue-black deck where you're just like playing removal spells, killing things, draw cards, killing things, draw cards kind of deck.
All right. And looks like I'll complete my Scale the Heights collection then. On this one. And
Sure.
then Pickaxe or Mind Drain. Take the axe.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. It will to take the on-color cards. We probably won't play them, but
Right. I'm gonna move at least that one down. All right. So this is the last rotation, right?
Yep. Pack 3.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We got the Cleric. Seen that one. Vastwood Surge. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put them on the battlefield tap. Then shuffle. If the spell's kick. Put 2 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Seems pretty good considering the deck that we got. There's a Disenchant. We talked about that. Tactics. We've also talked about that. Another Adventures Awaits. Another Stomper. I think we're good there. So I would probably either say the Cleric, right, which 1/1 to get the tap 2 creatures. I think I don't have any flying. Oh, it's a Fledgling. So I'd probably either go the Cleric or Surge, which Surge actually seems like it would be pretty decent. However, it would be a 8 mana to get the kicker. That seems a little unreasonable considering what we had. So I guess overall, be looking at the Cleric.
Yeah, so this is kind of a weird pack because
Okay.
I think Vastwood Surge it's certainly clunky as you've noticed where it is pretty expensive. But if you cast every kicker, you'll probably win the game. The concern I have here with Vastwood Surge is we already have 2 Stompers. So on turn 6, we're probably bouncing 2 of our lands back to our hand, back to 4 lands in play. So kicking the Surge does seem a little bit difficult. That being said, it's still the best card in the pack by a lot. We don't really want a 3rd Stomper. And then I think every other card in this pack that's in our colors just isn't good. Tactics, Disenchant, Adventure Awaits, all just not really playable. And then Cleric and the white card on the top right. Cleric and Protector are both just like mediocre cards that don't really do enough for us. So I think the options here, honestly, are Vastwood Surge for our deck, which I think will be a little worse than usual because we already have 2 Stompers, or Linvala for your collection, honestly. And that's part of drafting is that, like, if the pack isn't really favoring you in any way, and there's a constructed playable rare in it, you can just take it, put it in your sideboard. It's 1 pick.
Okay.
So I think that you still probably want the Surge, but again, I'm not thrilled because we already have 2 Stompers. If our deck had 0 Stompers, I am slamming the Surge here. I'm very, very happy about it. It's probably still fine either way, but I would not feel bad about just like taking Linvala for your collection because I don't think I love Vastwood Surge. And then the idea of splashing Linvala is just not a good idea. So my chat's saying we could splash Linvala. So when you want to splash for a card in Limited, a few things need to happen. One, you got to have fixing. You need to have a way to cast it. Right now our deck has 0 points of fixing at all. There are no cards that get lands that get blue. There are no creatures that tap for any color of mana. There's no dual lands. So it would be exceedingly difficult to splash Linvala in this deck. And then as far as what you're getting, Linvala is a very, very solid card, but it's not the kind of card you just play and win the game. You know, it's a 3/3 flyer for 3, which is great. It can protect your creatures, which is great. If you're partying, it's also great. But it's not a kind of card where you just play it and the game ends. You know, for example, the card in the new set, it's like the red-black demon with an X in the cost, and it can either shrink everything -X, or return your own creatures. That's the kind of card where you cast that card and you just win the game. You kill all your opponent's stuff, or you return all your creatures. It's good on turn 4. It's good on turn 10. It's just such a great bomb in every sense of the word that it's worth it to like muck up your mana a little bit, because anytime you cast that card, you're like 90% to win. Linvala is not that kind of card. So while I think splashing isn't even reasonable here anyway, just a little bit on splashing as far as like when you should splash and what you need to splash. Linvala is not one of those kind of cards, and it would be very difficult here anyway. So yeah, I think that the pick here is either Basswood Surge or Linvala for your collection. I think we'll probably play the Surge, because it is still pretty good. But I worry it's not going to be amazing in our deck, because it's the kind of thing where, like we were saying earlier, it is tap 4 mana. It does something. If we have landfall creatures in play, it does pump them, so it affects the board in that way. But we don't really have like that many landfall creatures. We have, Prowling Feldar, we have Fledgling, we have some, but so it's probably Surge. I mean, it also ramps the Stomper too. That's pretty true. It's probably just Surge. But if you're like, I'm building Angels and I really want to have his Linvala, I wouldn't fault you for taking that either.
I'm not,
because part of drafting is building your collection.
And I don't have either of these cards, so I feel like it's fine to pick.
Sure, like at a Pro Tour, you're obviously never doing that, but like when you're drafting an arena, like that is part of it. You it's one pick. It's not gonna swing your entire draft one way or another, and then that is one less wild card you need to use. So
okay,
the Surge is good here.
Yeah, we're gonna go Surge. Disruption, acquisition, another Ox, resolute strike. Target creature gets 2/2 till the end of the turn. If it's a warrior, you may attach an equipment you control to it. Seems very, very specific. The green down here, this is the enchant land, the Zendikar. Wow, this one doesn't really seem super.
This pack sucks.
Yeah,
put it mildly.
Yeah.
Zendikar is like, it's all right. It's not super, incredible or anything like that. We already have the Oxen. The Strike's pretty, Strike is in the same class as Might and Marasa for the most part. It's a little worse, but, I love White Mana Tricks personally because they're very hard to play around. But, the important thing when you read the Strike is, again, rate. Don't be fooled by the extra text on the card. It's what's it do at a base level? Is that okay? Okay, what's the extra stuff? And then how good is that kind of thing? So start with the base level and then work from there. But yeah, I mean, it's probably Zendikar here. It's all right. It is, it's more of like a 5 mana card because you need to play it on a land that's untapped to attack with it immediately. It is pretty cool on spell lands where if we play McKindy Stampede as a land early, you can put Zendikar on it later and then maybe get the land back, which is kind of cool too. So it's probably Zendikar. But yeah, pretty bad pack overall. And honestly, the rest of the pack's kind of bad too. It's not like we're like missing out here. It's just a pretty Moby pack, which happens.
Okay, sorry. My wife is like, hey, just letting you know, they are digging near the utilities out back. I'm like, I don't like that at all. But so if I just disappear suddenly, you know why.
Sure.
I hope that does not happen. But thank you, wife, for keeping an eye out for me. Okay, so here we are. Cleric. Enters the battlefield with 1/1 counter on it. For each color of mana spent to cast it. That's not going to help us too much. Base Camp enters the battlefield tap. Add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast party class. Pressure Point. Tap target creature. Draw a card. That seems pretty good. Another Felidar. And then the Blight Blade. So, I mean, I guess from like because I'm doing pretty decent on creatures. I guess just from a, utility perspective, tapping a target creature, drawing a card for 2 mana seems pretty reasonable. I don't really have much else in there. I don't know that I'm gaining much by getting a second Felidar here. And the Cleric for 5 mana. I feel like that's not really gonna do much of anything. So I'm leaning more towards Pressure Point here.
So Pressure Point is the card I actually like, but it's the same heuristic as before. Is don't think about what it does, think about casting it, right? So we cast Pressure Point on turn 5 to tap a blocker. That means we only have 3 mana left and we're not playing a 5-drop, you know? So I think when your deck is really, really cheap, if our deck was like a real aggro deck that had like, 3/1 drops, 8/2 drops, 3/3 drops, and like 1/4 drop and then just spells, I'd say that our Pressure Point's very, very good because we're kind of just like creature, tap your thing, attack, kill you. But our deck has a much higher curve than that. So finding the time and mana to cast Pressure Point seems a little tough. And then we also we've got ways to push through. We have Double Stomper, we have McKendy Stampede, all of our landfall creatures attack for a lot. So, again, thinking about the end game, what's our game going to look like and what kind of things do we need? And I don't think Pressure Point's a necessary card to push through.
Yeah.
I think I would take the Feldar here. Now that we have the Vastwood Vastwood Surge and 2 Stompers, the landfall, I think the landfall cards go up in value because we have a lot of ways to keep playing lands over and over again. Okay. And honestly, if we just go Feldar on turn 4, and then on turn 5 we cast Vastwood Surge and get 2 lands. Now Feldar's a 5/6 Vigilance, so we've kind of sped up the process a bit. So I think the Feldar has more value now. So
makes sense. And I wrote down, think about when to cast it, because
exactly.
I know that you've stressed that several times.
Yeah, the thing about actually casting the card when you're evaluating it, because people do that all the time, and it's one of the most common mistakes in card evaluation where they look at the card and they're like, "This is awesome." It's like, well, do you think about the time you're going to spend to cast the card? It doesn't just start in the battlefield. You have to actually get it there, and that's a big opportunity cost. So people kind of ignore the opportunity cost and just think about the benefits. But it's a very it's an analysis on both sides. So yeah, Feldar's cool here for sure.
Got it. All right, I'm gonna
my chats
and learn that what
chats. The card Base Camp was a card I went on a rant on during my set review because typically this sort of tribal scrappy creature decks aren't very good and constructed, and the most important thing for a cheap aggressive deck is to have good mana. So there's just no reason why that card should come in tapped. It's not too good, right. And party decks might have worked and constructed if it came in untapped. So that was a huge rant I had. So my chat's take the base camp, Jim. Take the base camp, Jim. So they're getting restless. I'm not talking to them. So yeah, but I think Feldar's pretty solid here.
So we got another Pressure Point. Tazim Raptor. Flying, you may return a land you control to your owner's hand for 3 mana. And then another Stomper. So considering we're pretty good on the Stompers, and talking about Pressure Point, I'm thinking about when cast this. This seems like it could play into some of the sustainability that we already have in this deck in terms of continuing the landfall. Flying as well, which certainly proves to be decent. So I would say the Raptor.
Yep, I think it's very reasonable. Again, on rate, it's 2/2 flyer for 3, which is not incredible, but fine, certainly passable. And then the ability to recur landfall. It's important to know it's an optional too. I think if it like Stomper, if it wasn't optional, I'd be much less excited about it. But the option to play it on turn 3 or play it on turn 6 and bounce a land is pretty sweet. So I like that.
Awesome. All right. We've got the War Leader, another Outrider, the Seagate Banneret. Creatures you control get 1/1 until the end of the turn. Is a warrior. Outside of that, another Scale of the Heights. A 1 mana 1/2 with the ability to tap if it stays on the field. Seems like that would work pretty well with the deck that I've got. If I'm comparing that to the Outrider, target creature gets 1 for each creature of the party. Yeah, I would still say that the Seagate Banneret.
The issue with Banneret is that just on base rate, I know a 1/2 for 1 seems fine, but the thing is that as far as just numbers go, 1 power is just never good, because the 2 is obviously double 1, so once you get 2 power or 3 power, that's where things actually start to matter. But a 1 power creature will almost never kill anything. So the base stats on the Banneret are just pretty mopey. Not a card. I don't think there's a card in this pack we would actually play anyway. So, but just on general evaluation for Banneret, I think if you're a super low to the ground aggressive deck, with no real 5-drops and a lot of cheap creatures, Banner could be like an okay passable card, but on average, it's not very good. So this is the kind of spot where like take Guard Your Collection, whatever, take a War Leader or something like that. I mean, there's no playable cards here.
I need one more
Sure,
War Leader
fire it up,
War Leader it is. And you're going down the sideboard. All right. So we've got the Kalini Ambush, 3 mana, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Love that. Also land card, Vine Gecko. The first kick spell you cast each turn costs 1 less whenever you kick the spell. All right, very situational. We only have a couple of kick. There's another Baloth in here, and then another Reclaim the Waste. So I would say probably the Kalani Ambush.
Ambush is perfect in
Yeah.
every way. So we're green-white. We're a little light on removal. It's a removal spell. All of our stuff gets really big, and then it's very good with the landfall things. With Baloth, we play a land. Now it's a 6/5. It's going to win most fights. It's a land to bounce with our Stomper and our stuff like that. This is just like the actual perfect card for us in every way. Another Baloth here would be okay. Don't underestimate the 2-drop, the Gecko, because again, look at it from a perspective of like it's just a bear. This card is better than Mesa Links in our deck, realistically, because we have like 2 kicker cards. And like, maybe, and the thing is, maybe we don't kick the whatever, but like if we happen to kick a Gnarlwood Colony for 4 instead of 5, that's more potential value than a Mesa Links, which is kind of just whatever. So don't, it's a kind of thing where like, don't just look at it's a kicker card, we don't want that. Again, rate first, judge the rate, then look at everything else on top of it. But yeah, Ambush here is by far the best card. It's a phenomenal card for our deck.
Awesome. All right, a base camp. Well, that's an easy pick then. No, just Cell Sword, Blood Prince, Molten Blast, Scavenge Blade, another Nectar Pot, another Stomper. This doesn't seem like too great.
Realistically, our quota's filled here. We have 27 playables right now, so we're already cutting 4 cards from our deck anyway. And then none of the cards here are better than the cards we're cutting regardless. So it's kind of just whatever. You can just grab whatever you need to grab.
Okay. I'm gonna grab collection based here. So let's go ahead. We'll grab that Nectar Pot. He's been feeling bad that we've been passing on him so much. So the Mystic, another Lynx, Riptide, Rage, Hellion, Tormenting Voice, and then Territory of Sithcat. Trample landfall whenever land enters the battlefield under your control. Put a 1/1 counter. 3 mana, 2/1, not great, but with trample and landfall, that seems. I mean, it seems like not the greatest for overall, but in terms of what I have to choose.
It's very solid. It's very similar to Feldar. The differences are that while Feldar starts out a little bit better, the opportunity cost on Scythe Cat is much lower, because turn 3 is a less important turn than turn 4. If we're playing a creature that's a little weak on turn 3 and then it'll get better, there's less of a pressure on us to have a really, to be able to affect the board. But for turn 4 with the Feldar, at that point, if we're on the draw, our opponent might have gotten creature on 2, 3, and 4 and be pressuring us a lot that turn. So because the opportunity cost is lower, I think Scythe Cat's pretty sweet, honestly. And then it scales well. Again, it gets counters, so it keeps growing as the game goes on, and as trample, it makes our Canopy Surge better. Not Canopy Surge. I'm sorry, Basswood Surge better. I think the cat's actually great for us.
And is this card just look unique because I have a cosmetic somewhere?
You must have gotten a free card style at some point.
Okay. All right. All right. Disenchant, Duelist, Adventure Awaits, Utility Knife. I mean, none of this is really going to help me out.
Yeah,
so again, to
whatever.
your point, just like collection pick. Great. We'll take this chance. That might be good in a different deck. So move that down. Blight Priest, Wizard, Bug Catcher, Rage, and Utility Knife. Same boat.
Yeah, just at this point, it's just kind of the last 5 picks in a draft. Usually, there's no more speculation to be had. There's no cards in your color. You just get a card and chuck it.
Okay. We got the Cleric again, Base Camp, Pressure Point, and Rage.
Yeah, I mean, Pressure Point's like the card most likely to make your deck, but again, I don't think we'll end up playing it, but either way, 6 of one, half a dozen the other. Sure, same thing. I would take Expert here. Expert's a mildly playable card in Constructed. So.
Okay. I'm picking for collection on that one, and sick. I needed one more of those. All right. Boom.
All right, so let's go to your layout. So what's I guess we'll move me because I'm kind of in the way here.
Oh yeah. Here, I'll just turn it on for a second.
Okay, and then I would hit the little minus magnifying glass on the top right. It's above the high. Yeah, that one. There you go. Great. So first off, we'll just cut all of our off-color cards. I often also just cut all the lands too, just to make it easier. So I would cut all the off-color cards and all of your lands.
So off-color cards, Scorch Rider.
Yep.
And Rage. And is that it?
We got an Expert and 2 drops also.
Oh, thank you.
And then I would just cut all the lands too. Just it makes it easier to see if you're at 23 cards and you just do the lands at the end.
Just cut them out.
Yep.
Including the Barons.
Yeah, we'll make sure we don't forget to put the Barons back in. But for now, you can just cut it.
Okay.
All right, so we got to go through and cut out the weak links, basically. So,
and one quick question here, Jim. So, can we talk a little bit about like 40 card deck, where I want to be with lands?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like when I'm getting to this point, in terms of like numbers and balance, what am I immediately aiming for here?
17 lands is the baseline. So that's your default. You know, there are times you'll play 16. There are times you'll play 18. Some formats are unique. So this format is unique because of the spell lands. So for example, you know, Makindi Stampede and Kalani Ambush are lands, but they're also spells. So usually you lean a little higher. You count a card like Kalani Ambush is like half a land. And because we are also landfalling, there's some value in wanting to play a little more lands than usual because we want to keep making our land drops and keep landfalling and stuff like that. Oh, we do have ways to bounce them, which is kind of cool too. We also have crawling barons as well. So it comes down, your land count comes down to 17 as a baseline, and then how can I push it? You know, do I have things to do with my mana? For example, if you're kind of like a 4 or 5 color slow deck with lots of card draw, you'll play more lands because you have things to do every turn. You want to keep making land drops. So on turn 8, you're like, play a 4-mana card draw spell and a 4-mana removal spell in the same turn. If you're an aggressive deck and you don't really have any ways to use your mana late in the game, might want 16 or occasionally even like 15 if your curve is really, really low. You know, it also depends on like cards you have that make mana, you know, spell lands, different things like that. So between the fact that we have 2 spell lands and we have a landfall deck and we have crawling barons, I'd probably want 18 lands in this deck, counting our spell lands as half a land. So it would be 16
okay.
land. I'm sorry, 17 land.
Got it. Okay. So at this point, then also this is where then I'm kind of determining what are we going to cut out of this.
Right. So we need 17. We need 23 spells. We're going to make 6 cuts right now. So
okay.
You can go through and pick out the cards we think are the least exciting.
Okay. So I'm thinking probably don't need 2 pickaxes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that we might play 1, but we'll see. You can actually click the card. Just like click it. There you go.
Oh, got it. And then I'm guessing that we scale the heights. We definitely don't need 3 of those. I'm not even sure we need all of them, but I'm going to put 2 back for now. And then I'm guessing an ox could potentially sit on the side. Well, the nectar pot we could probably get rid of. An ox.
Yeah, I think that pressure point and maybe even Mesa Links can go. Like point for sure. Maybe the Links. The ox is pretty good. You know, it is definitely a decent top end card for us. Okay. Honestly, you might even want I'm not even sure we want any scale to heights. You know, the question is like a card like the pickaxe is really, really good early, but gonna wane as the game goes on. I think we have enough like landfally stuff where it's like probably fine to play the axe, but So right now we're at 1 scale, 2 ox. Other option, get pressure point, miss links, necropod. I think I honestly, maybe we just want to have the extra 2-drop in the link. Links is like pretty mopey though. So you have Mite, Colony, Double Survivor, Fledgling, Raptors, Routlings. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 2-drops. I think Scale the Heights, the playability of Scale the Heights is highly predicated on if we can play a 2-drop. If we play a 2-drop on 2 and then cast Scale, I'm okay with Scale. Otherwise, I'm not. Yeah, the Zendikars are kind of okay. Not super exciting. The thing is, we are 23 right now. So I don't know. Any card we cut, we would need to add a card as well. And I'm not sure that there are cards that are better than what we have. Yeah, chat's saying that chat wants to smite over the Zendikar. The Zendikar is definitely pretty. It's just gonna play a lot worse than it looks. There are also common bounce spells which totally blow it out too, where they'll bounce the land. You don't get the effect of anything like that, and it basically just kills it.
Right.
So let's cut Zendikar, and I think playing smite is fine. We do have 2 survivors for kind of like the cute backdoor like pump your creature and kill it, and then like we just don't have much removal in general. So I think overall I'm happy with this. I would say I'm a little unsure about the pickaxe. I'm a little unsure about like the second ox and the Scale the Heights. I think they're all fine. And again, I have not played a lot of this format, so these are the kind of things that I would learn over the course of multiple drafts.
And also, I mean, I can, if I decide, okay, I am gonna go with that. We'll try the pickaxe. If I'm just feeling it's not really working, I can always just come back and adjust this deck.
And I recommend you do that. That you try this, try that. You seem to be pretty good with the experimental like element of the game. I think it's very, very important. Just try this, try that, try this, try that kind of thing. So pretty happy here. So let's add the Barons back in, and then we're just gonna split the lands evenly. I think we have more green.
Is there a easy way to just have it autofill lands?
No, you just put them in. It's kind of annoying actually. So you on the top hit the land button. You have that right there, and then you pick the one you want. And if the one you want is 2 pages over, you got to scroll all the way. It's pretty annoying, but
right.
I think I would like to add. I believe we're adding 16 lands here. I think I would like to be 9/7, 9 forest and 7 plains.
Okay. And again, that's kind of based off of. Wait, you said 9. And 7 planes. Okay.
You can actually click the land itself, and you should be there's a little plus minus dialogue should pop up. There you go.
Got it. So
that's a new one. That's a nice improvement. So this should be 40 cards, correct?
It is 40 cards. Yeah.
All right. So we have 16, 17. We have 17 lands plus 2 spell lands. So effectively, it's gonna play like 18 lands. We have a pretty good curve here, and we have 5 2-drops.
What's our other second spell land?
We have the Stampede and the Ambush. Right, Kalani Ambush and McKinney Stampede.
Oh God! Oh yeah! Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, and then
I need to.
So yeah, overall, our curve is pretty good. We have some good late game stuff, some good early game stuff. We are a little light on removal, so I think we definitely, we're definitely leaning aggressive. So our games are going to play out reasonably aggressively. We have a pump spell, we have a smite, we have the Stampede. So we have some ways to break through. We have double Ox. I think a lot of our cards just scale well too. We have double Feldar, the Scythe Cat. These are all cards that as the game go on, if things stall out, you just keep playing lands and keep playing lands. So I think overall this deck seems pretty good. I would say, if I had to rate this deck, maybe 7.5 to an 8, and a lot of that isn't always predicated on how well you've drafted, because like any deck that's a 9 or higher is going to have like 1 or 2 really good rares in it. That's just like what a really good draft deck looks like. And you don't need a good rare or two to like 3-0 a draft or get 7 wins in an arena run, but it helps. Like there's plenty of times where you'll have a deck that's just like a bunch of good commons and uncommons. Your archetype came well together. You've got a good curve, you've played well, and you can get 7 wins regardless. But having rares does make it a little bit easier. I guess the Barons is a pretty good rare. It's kind of innocent looking, but it is a nice rare. So that's pretty good. But we don't have any like Planeswalker or like really obscene powerful cards in our deck.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Cool. So you want to hop in for like we'll do like one game maybe?
Yeah, for
Cool.
sure. For sure.
Because it's funny because like that was a lot. I mean, that was like that was a long time drafting, talking about it, which worked out really, really well. And that's only half of it, because the other half is the gameplay. And limited gameplay is your nuts and bolts. Just blue collar. This is how you play Magic. If you're good at Magic, you're good at limited kind of thing. And it's tough. There's a lot to learn on that side of things too. And that's what makes drafting interesting. Some players are very strong drafters and not necessarily the best player. And then vice versa, some players are really, really good players and don't necessarily draft that well. So, there's a bit of each. Drafting well makes your games easier, but if you're really, really good, I've watched, really, really good players have just a terrible deck and just scrap their way to 3 wins because they're just like that good, So it's a two sides of the coin kind of thing for sure.
Got it. And so I noticed here it says ends in. So when a new draft comes in, they like put a time limit on that. So
I guess that's kind of annoying, but so you'll have 2 hours to finish the run, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a little tight. Yeah, unfortunately, timing worked out like just a little bit off for the stream.
It's all fine. I don't mind. Like I said in chat, I'm like, the knowledge was worth the spend. So thank you, Jim.
For sure.
It's like I'm not gonna cry over that. So all right, I'm queuing up.
Cool. So let's jump in. So I obviously have a little less time to talk about it while we're actually playing a real game, but I'll do my best to kind of like lay things out as far. The important things in the actual gameplay are sequencing, kind of laying out your, figuring out how you're gonna plan your hand out, and so on and so forth. So, thoughts on my hand?
I'm liking this. I see the ability to get one of these out pretty early, potentially play the pickaxe early. Only 3 lands is not like optimal, but I'm feeling like I have a plan here.
Yeah, I think 3 is great. Honestly, I think this is like a pretty optimal hand. We have some 2-drops. We have a card draw thing in both of our colors on the play. Seems great.
Okay. I'm keeping all 7. And then, so kind of thinking this out, even though I could play the pickaxe first, it seems like the bad move because then I would have to spend the mana. But I'm still going to play a forest first.
So we'll see what they do as far as their land drop. So they're playing an island. So what 2-drop do you want to play here? You want to play the fledgling or play the survivor?
I would probably play.
One thing you can do too, so is it like when you've thought for a bit, play your planes now.
What?
Like play your planes.
Oh, okay.
Now that you've played the planes, you've sort of reset your chess clock, so your rope won't come as fast. So like if you're thinking for a bit, you think for a bit, then make an action. Then you can think for longer. Just like tricks of a trade.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna put the survivor out first.
Why survivor over fledgling?
Well, actually, no. No, you're right. I put the fledgling out first because I'd rather put the pickaxe on that to get like the double landfall.
Yeah, I think that also your opponent playing a blue land. Blue is the color least likely to kill your creature. So I think our fledgling is very important, but they're not as likely to kill it. If there was a mountain or a swamp or a little, they're a little likely they can kill it. But fledgling also is the card that grows really well too. So we can go next turn. We can go pickaxe, put the axe in the fledgling, play a land, play survivor, kind of really go nuts. They have a swamp, sure. We'll see how it plays out. Drawing ox is fine too. Now we're playing towards a 5-drop, which is kind of cool as well. We'll see what they're up to here. Very good start, I would say. Very good start. We have the early game kind of on lockdown. We have a card to play too. It's a little more expensive. And they're going to play a Royal Mage, a vanilla 2/1. So, drawing Smite. Oh, no land first. No land first. Make sure you play the axe first.
Oh, right. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was
so pretty simple here. We should go axe, play land, and then the question is going to be: do we want to play the? Do we want to use the survivor to add a counter to the fledgling and kind of go all in on it, or do we want to survivor put the counter on the survivor itself? So, we're playing Survivor for sure because we have the mana for it. So,
Right.
which way do you want to go?
I would actually probably just, even though like, hey, 5 damage is better than 4, I feel like putting the counter on the Survivor gives it a little bit more potential survivability.
So
I mean,
I think that line of thinking is correct on average, but not given the current board state. So our opponent played a 2/1, just a 2/1 ground creature. So our Survivor as a 2/2 would trade with that, but as a 1/1
Right.
we also trade with that, and we can get the value off of it too. So now we're gaining value where we kill their creature and buff our creature. So I agree we're going a little bit all in here, but Survivor blocks Royal Mage, so we already have an exchange set up there, and we're just getting it for 5 years. So we're putting them in a spot where if they don't answer this, they're just like dead in 2 turns, which is awesome. And if they do answer it, we still are going to gain value off our Survivor by having it block the 2/1. So if they had played a 2/2 there, I would agree with you. But it's, your sequencing is based, of course, on your own cards as well as, your opponent's cards they've played and things they could also play too.
Yeah, I guess I also should probably consider, like, again, this is where knowledge will help, but a blue-black, there's limits to what they could even use versus like a red to, do 2 damage or whatever. So vanquish the weak, destroy target creature with power 3 or less.
Okay, so they had the kill spell, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
My chat has mentioned that we could have put the counter on the Survivor and then used the Scale the Heights also on the Survivor, made it a 3/3. So now we have the option to block here. I think we're not blocking. So I think it might have been maybe the counter going to the Survivor is definitely it could go either way. Our play was a little more risky with a higher payoff, but less upside less safety. So option here is to block or not. They're already at 15. I'm pretty happy not blocking here. I'm pretty happy just taking it.
Not block.
And I think because of that, I think maybe we should put the counter on the Survivor. Because if we think we're not blocking there by kill our creature, that's kind of the thinking ahead process. But so now we drew a land. So our options are to equip the pickaxe, play a forest, and attack for 3, or to play Scale the Heights, put it on the Survivor, and attack for 2. Scale the Heights will draw a card, but the axe will be permanently equipped to the Survivor. So I think I'd rather equip here and just play a forest to get it for 3.
Yeah.
And then if we draw a land, we're playing the Ox, which is great. If we don't draw a land, we play Scale the Heights, which is also fine. Try and play a land off that. So yeah, so Magic's hard. I think that and then now that I'm thinking more about it, it might have actually been correct to put the counter of a Survivor. Thinking about if they kill my creature, what's my next turn going to look like? So that it's tough, but it's definitely a consideration.
That's Magic, right? I mean, you're presented. You have like a tree with many paths in front of you, and
exactly. And the thing is that like in chess, you got to plan out those next few moves. What's this turn going to look like? What's the next turn going to look like? And so on and so forth. So we draw a land here, which is fine. Now our Survivor's a potential 3/3, which can't beat the Skitter Sneak. So our options are we could play Scale the Heights and put the extra counter on the Survivor, and it would be a 4/4. But if we do that, what are they likely to do?
Right. What are they likely to do?
Yeah.
If I put the counter on
right. So we play land, and we have a 3/3, and then if we were to play Scale the Heights, our Survivor would be a 4/4, and then if we attack with it, what are they likely to do?
Just block.
They probably block both, right?
Block.
So in that case, we're just trading our creature for their 3/4.
Yeah.
Which is like kind of So I think I'd rather just play the land and play the Ox here. And then we can set up for next turn where it's possible we'll even have two land drops next turn because we can draw a land for turn and draw a land up the Heights too. But now the Ox will make blocks terrible for them. This is more of a setup turn. We could find an attack here if it's reasonable, but it's not that good. And I'd rather just play Ox, kind of set up for next turn. We're definitely ahead. We're ahead on life. Now we're ahead on board. And they play a big creature, we can kill it. If they don't, we can Scale the Heights. We draw a land, it's fine. We draw a spell, it's fine. So this is kind of the cool thing about landfall, where like right now lands or spells are good for us. So most of our draws are live.
Got it.
So they're gonna main phase a Soaring Thought Thief. Are either of their creatures rogues?
No. No.
Wizard.
And yes,
that is a
the
rogue.
Sneak is a rogue. Yeah.
Okay. So if they attack with a 3/4, we're going to have some thinking to do because that's obviously a pretty weird attack into our 4/4. So we'll see what they're up to. Obviously, the Soaring Thought Thief has Flash, so them playing it in their main phase is a little odd. Usually you'd wait till our turn to play it. and they're just gonna say go. Okay.
Okay, so I don't have a land to play. Could drop the 4. That wouldn't really do a whole lot for me this turn. Would this be the time to play the Scale of the Heights?
So we're thinking about our board right now, right? If we play Scale of the Heights, what's gonna happen? You know, if we can put a counter on our Ox, but even then our attacks aren't great if we don't draw a land because they can still block it with 2 creatures and it would die. I think this is another setup turn. Where I'd rather just play the Prowling Feldar, say go for a turn. We're still ahead on the board, you know, and then now we have some big draws where, again, any land is an insanely good draw. Spells are good too. If we draw cards not really castable, we can cast Scale of the Heights and kind of keep bumping everything up. If they play a big creature, we have an answer for that too. So we have a lot of things covered right now, and I don't think our attacks are particularly great. So no real reason to get frisky here because their board is currently not beating our board. We're in no rush. You know, the Thought Thief can get it for 1 if it wants to. I mean, whatever, we're at 18, it's fine, you know. So I'm feeling pretty safe here, and part of that's due to the Smite the Monstrous. So if they do play some big blocker that can stop our creatures, we can just kill it. But all right, so that. So we draw a land. So I think the first thing we would like to do is actually cast the Scale.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would like to see what we draw and kind of go from there. They do have 6 mana available and 2 cards. It's always important to kind of note, like, okay,
right.
My opponent has a lot of cards in their hand and mana up. Things are fishy. I would say things right now aren't that fishy because you need to think to yourself, what could they have done? You know, in the last few turns, they made land drops. I think they mulliganed this game, and they could have played a creature, but maybe they wouldn't have. They could have lands in their hand. Is it possible they have a trick? Yeah, but so now where do you want this to go?
So let's see. 5 could take anything on. I mean, probably the Survivor or the Ox.
I think it's a Survivor. I think this is an egg, spreading our eggs out kind of thing. So I think Survivor, pump it up. Now the land drops, make it a 4/4. So we'll have a 4/4, a 4/4, and a 3/4 at minimum, maybe more if we draw another land. And then also, if they have a kill spell here, then we don't get blown out. So they have a negate, which is fine. Yeah, make sure our clock's a little low. So landfall, I would tap the 3/4 and just serve. So we're attacking for a lot here.
And then attack all the way.
Yeah,
up.
let it ride.
Yeah.
So if that had been a removal spell, they could have killed our creature in response, and we would have lost out on the ability to draw a card, but a counter on it. So targeting our worst creature there into their open mana is very safe. You know it's always an amount of hedging where like your opponent has mana open. There's times you can just like do nothing and just play around it if you think they have something. But there's the kind of thing where like, well, they might have it and they might not. So I'm gonna hedge. I'm gonna put it on the smaller creature and make it safer. And if if a bad thing happens, it won't be that bad. So they milled a lot of spells, but again, drawing lands is also great too. So just play a land, tap their thing, and just make him have something. I mean, we're attacking for much more than lethal here. So
yep.
All right, cool. So they got a little flooded. It looks like they kind of ran out of spells, but we did too. We had 8 lands in play. So we'll take that. So yeah, it's a lot of, just kind of like planning out how your turns are going to look. And then, I think that the biggest thing in Limited is playing around cards. Basically figuring out when you think you can play around cards. And then if you are going to play around it, how you're going to do it. If you're not going to play around it, how you're going to do it. So in that spot, we deduced that like they might have something, but probably not. But we're still going to take the safer line. Maybe making the Ox just really, really big would have been like the most, if they had absolutely nothing, the coolest thing to do.
Right.
But we're going to hedge a bit, And then, like I said, there's spots there where if they had 5 cards in their hand and said go, I might have cast nothing there and just said go and let them leave their mana up. And there's a bit of format knowledge in there too, where like once have a good idea what the cards are in the format, you can kind of have an idea what they have and therefore play around it even more. So for example, in the new D&D set, it's one of like the, you set the traps kind of card or whatever, where it's the white card where it's 2 mana and it deals 5 damage to an attacking creature. And these cards are very common in basically every Limited format where the white removal is restricted to only stopping attackers or blockers. So your opponent will, say go on turn 3. They have 6 cards in their hand and they have all their mana untapped and you have a good creature in play and they just say go. And you're like, all right, come on. So you think about it and you decide to yourself like, well, right now, I can just not attack. I can develop my board and sort of like, develop my board, keep things going. I'm already ahead because I have a creature and they don't. And now if I just say go and don't attack, opportunity cost is I didn't attack for 2 or 3 damage. But the benefit is they wasted an entire turn. Now it goes to their turn 4. Do they play their 4-drop? Or do they leave up mana again for this attacker card?
Right,
and if they leave up mana again, I can just say, you know what? Play a creature, go, not attack. So finding the spots like that where you that's a little more format knowledge, where like, once you know the cards in the format, but there's always a card like that. White always has a card that's like deal damage to an attacker. Red always has a card that's like, 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a creature. Green always has a pump spell of some kind. So you got to get like a feel for like the thing where you might, be like, well, they got something here. I'm not sure what it is. It's probably like in the range of these things, and then you're kind of like sculpting your plans around that. And that's hard to do. It's not easy. That's a very, very challenging thing to do. But that's the beauty of Magic is sort of like finding those spaces. And then you also need to decide if like, I think my deck's really kind of slow and fast and scrappy and not very good. I can't win a long game. I don't think that if it goes to turn 6 or 7, I can even win. I think I just have to attack and do it. I don't have a choice.
Right.
Or this creature isn't very good. I have a better creature in my hand. So I'm just going to attack and make him use it and play a better creature, So there's always a myriad of possibilities. Like you're saying, there's like the branching paths and stuff. And like, it's a lot. It's a complicated game. That's why it's so great.
It's great. No, this has been so great. I mean, I definitely like. Here's what I'm excited about. Obviously, I'll finish this off right. Well, as much as I probably can in the next little bit, and then I'm gonna over the course of the next week, I'm really gonna try to just focus on some drafts. Mm-hmm. And I believe that we're getting back together again next week, right? Next Friday.
Sure.
All right, awesome. And then maybe we'll see if there was any improvements that happened there. We'll be in AFR, so it'd be a different set.
Yes.
I'm probably more familiar with that one than
I am too, actually. So
good. But no, I mean, I've taken a ton of notes.
Excellent.
I feel like I've pulled a lot away, and considering yesterday I would not have felt comfortable going into a draft, I feel like this weekend I'm pretty excited because some of the philosophy that you've doled out and just some of the ways of thinking, I think are going to be really helpful. They definitely fill in a lot of the knowledge gaps that I personally feel like I'm have a deficit in. So.
Sweet. I will say it's important to note you've taken a lot in the last 3 hours.
Oh,
a lot. So definitely make sure don't feel like you're the next draft you do, you're like you got to utilize all of it. Kind of like compartmentalize it a little bit. Kind of think about each thing as a major point, and you might do a draft where you work on one thing, where like the next draft, like I'm going to focus on rate. I'm going to focus on making sure all my cards are a good rate and, watch out for abilities. Next draft, I'm going to focus on gameplay. I'm going to focus on this, and that, and kind of just work through. If you try and do it all at once, it can be a little overwhelming. To my chat saying the proverbial drinking from the fire hose kind of thing. So
it was a little bit, but I think when I step back and I think about what are the 3 things that I can clearly take away from this and probably improve any draft experience I'm having. The number one thing is definitely think about when to cast it, right? So we talked about the value of the cards. What does the card actually do? I need to add in the additional, piece of, all right, in the grand scheme of the game, whether I'm drawing this in my initial hand or later on, right? Adding that, I think, is going to help me immensely. The other part I think that I take away they're important is this idea that the first 8 picks are important to get into the right lane, right? Where I think I was very confused on where I'm trying to be in the right lane. And I think putting the emphasis at the front, again, will be very helpful in helping me. And then we talked a little bit about moving the goalpost. And I think before I was more thinking nope, we use cement to put that goalpost in the ground. We're not going to move it, which is probably not a great plan. So thinking about the flexibility, feeling confident in knowing when I could be moving the goalpost. So these are some of the things I'm going to try to be aware of. And I think you kind of going through the instruction today, these are some of the key learnings I take away that I think will kind of help me as I continue this journey into drafting.
Yeah, I will say I think that draft was a pretty good example of a good staying open for the first 8 or 9 picks, sort of picking our deck, keeping ourselves open for a backdoor in pack 2, and then it wasn't really there, so we just stayed the course, and then we were green white. I think that was a pretty standard flow of how a draft would go. Where some drafts you just like open a blue red rare, it's busted. Blue red's open, you just perfect picks every pack. It's just like easy. And some drafts are the opposite. Some drafts you like take a blue card, then you take a black card, then take a red card. Now, oh my god, why is this awesome green card still in the pack? And then oh my god, it's like a white card, and you go into pack 2 like, oh my god, I have a sealed deck right now. I just have random cards. So I would say that this draft was a very, very kind of like solid, middle of the road. Like
Good.
How a lot of your drafts should look. Be speculative, be ready for things, but lock into your deck in pack 2, and you're good to go.
Awesome. Well, this is exciting. Very, very cool. I'm looking forward to this weekend and kind of sitting down and taking my new knowledge and running with it a little bit.
Sweet.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, I need to be wrapping up soon. I don't know if you want to do anything to wrap. I might just end up playing one more game before I fire off the stream. But yeah, are we gonna maybe do this again next week? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think Friday would work for me again. I'll double check my calendar. We'll talk on Discord, but I think Friday can work for me again.
Okay, great.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, and then I'm gonna keep streaming. I'm gonna do a few episodes of Bronze Mythic too. So.
Okay. Awesome.
Sweet.
Well, I'm gonna switch back my video here, but Jim, I have to say thank you very, very much for for taking me on this coaching, this mentoring, this journey. It's been absolutely great, and I know I do feel a bit overwhelmed, but in a very, very good way.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's that sort of like starry-eyed, like, oh wow, this is a you're Morpheus and Neo, take the red pill and whatever blue pill, whatever it is, and it's like the whole new world opens. Oh my god, and there's so much to take in at once, but like it's a new world. It's really cool, So
yeah.
Hopefully there aren't robots trying to kill us in this world, but I don't know. I haven't seen that movie in a while, so
not yet, anyway.
Yeah, maybe soon. Honestly,
we got the dancing robots coming out of Boston Dynamics, but
yeah, doing backflips and
yeah,
we'll soon be able to run us down at full speed, which is terrifying. But yeah,
awesome. Well,
great.
Everyone, Jim Davis, MTG on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter. So please do check it out. Thank you again so much, Jim. It's been a blast.
No, it's been awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, man. We'll see you soon.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
All right, sweet. So, again, if you're just tuning in, want to know what's going on right now, we kind of been hanging out with djWHEAT, who is Twitch, icon at Twitch, 20 years of esports, and just getting back into Magic. And this has been pretty fun, honestly. Kind of doing a little like pseudo coaching, kind of like guiding, helping to guide him into back into getting into Magic, which is super, super cool. So if you enjoyed this content, please let me know. Watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. I'm gonna keep streaming, but YouTube folks, if you enjoyed this content, please let me know. Obviously, a little more specialized content, but I think this is honestly for anyone who wants to learn a draft. I think this is like the perfect spot to be. I would say djWHEAT is like right in that sort of beginning stages where if you're just learning Magic, learning how to draft, this is like a great series. So awesome. Yeah, YouTube folks, love you. Like, comment, subscribe, and the stream folks, we're gonna keep going, so don't go nowhere, right?